Michigan International Speedway, a house of speed that has conquered many, but been conquered by few. As sweet as victory can be here, defeat can be that much more painful. The IndyCar drivers bravely ready themselves for a battle which demands wits, endurance, cunning, daring, and a large dose of raw courage. Here, they must enter their machines with the knowledge of what can happen on this racetrack and the ability to make sure it doesn't. When a car is working at Michigan, it can be run wide open. Boundaries do not exist for the driver who has everything at the moment. But Michigan's sting is legendary. It can turn a driver's world upside down, casting his fate to the unpredictable gods of racing, reducing him to nothing more than a passenger on a wild, seemingly endless ride. The danger is tangible. The men who drive the Indy cars know all about these dangers. Their eyes are not filled with fear, but with an understanding of what lies ahead. This is their livelihood and their life. They refuse to back down from this high-banked super speedway. 500 miles is a challenge they willingly accept, a road they happily travel. The price that may be paid is high. Man pushing machine to the limit, knowing full well that the other side of the envelope is dark. The battle rages in the cockpit and all around. Each man in the field straddling the line, yet not always in control of his own fate. Today, these daring men head back to the fight in the Michigan 500. Hills of southern Michigan, we're at Roger Penske's beautiful Michigan International Speedway. Hello and welcome, I'm Paul Page, and the Michigan 500 is an endurance test, a race of survival, with many different reasons for the different competitors as to why they want to be under the checkered flag first. Let's consider, first of all, Michael Andretti, who is the reigning PPG Cup champion, but right now is behind in the points. He must do well here today if he is to close on points leader Bobby Rahal. And then there is Rick Mears, the reigning champion here. He still suffers from a sore right wrist from that practice accident at the Indianapolis 500. And this is one very rough track. It's going to be a long day for Rick Mears. Then, too, there's the Ford Cosworth engine. It's in the first 4 qualified cars. They've never won a 500-mile race. They hope to do very well here today. And for the rest of the field, 500 miles on a rough, high-banked superspeedway makes for a very long afternoon with each one hoping for a win. Then there's the special story of the pole sitter, Mario Andretti. Right now, he's with Jack Arute.
And Paul, it's been almost 5 years since Mario Andretti has sat his car on the pole. And Mario, when you do it at this point in your career, how does it affect you? Does it silence some of the critics?
Well, it's very gratifying for me. I don't know if it silenced the critics, but it's an incredible satisfaction for all of us, the team, obviously. It was a long time coming in some ways, but, you know, things have to be right on, and I think I had that right on, and that's a credit to my crew, obviously.
And Paul, outside of him was supposed to be his son, Michael Andretti. But as you can see, the spot is empty right now. Here is what has happened in the last couple of hours. When they tried to start the car up, they found a miss in the engine. They have been working now for over an hour trying to trace the problem. In the meantime, they brought out the backup car because they have to be prepared to make a decision as to which one Michael Andretti will drive. He is not at all pleased about the turn of events, and they have until 1:38 to decide which car they will run. He has practiced this backup car before. He practiced it on Friday, and he did get some time in it. And this is the backup car, so this is a very unseemly turn of events for Michael Andretti, your outside pole winner. Now, for more stories on pit road, let's go further in the back to Gary Gerald.
Well, Jack, somewhat ironic that the last 3 races, Bobby Rahal has started from the pole, but because of an ill-handling car on the bumps, he finds himself at mid-pack, back in the 6th row. And Bobby, I'm sure we need to know, what do you think you can do to offset what appears to be an advantage for those Fords in particular?
Well, I'm not sure we could, no matter how good our car was handling, I'm not sure if we could keep pace with them on pure speed, but you know, it's a long race. We gambled a little bit on our setup and qualifying. That's why we ended up back here. But the car has gone very well in other practice sessions. And, you know, as I keep thinking about how few finishers there were last year, and the whole idea is for us to get through this thing.
No sense of desperation then for the man who leads the season point standings. We wish you well.
Thanks, Gary.
Paul?
But will Michael Andretti move to the backup car? We'll be moving toward the start of this race in just a moment.
The Michigan 500, brought to you by Ford and your Ford dealer. Have you driven a Ford lately? By Goodyear, #1 in tires. By Budweiser, the king of beers with that clean, crisp, cold taste. Nothing beats a Bud. And by Valvoline. People who know use Valvoline.
Back at Michigan International Speedway, where the Newman-Haas team has decided that it's not repairable in Michael's primary car, and so they have moved the 1X, the backup machine, out into Michael's original qualified position in the field. The rules do allow that. And with the championship battle now tightening, we thought we'd take a look at the life of Michael Andretti behind the scenes. Earlier this week, Sam Posey visited his home.
Nazareth, in Pennsylvania's Lehigh Valley, is a town where a sense of history hangs heavy along the quiet streets. Racing, by contrast, belongs to a world of here and now. Nazareth, tranquil and serene, is a place where time slows down, while IndyCar racing is sudden and can be violent. At ease in both worlds, and with his name adorning a business in his hometown of Nazareth, is Michael Andretti. He is a success, but he has not allowed this to change his relationship with his friends.
He's just like one of the guys. You know, he's nobody. He's no one different. I mean, he's, as far as sometimes I have a hard time realizing that he is Mike Andretti. As far as I'm concerned, he's Mike. I've known Mike for so many years that he's just Mike.
I've been with him at many, many races, and I've been fortunate to see at least 75% of his wins. And sometimes I even think about that, and I wonder, but he just won a big race, a major race, and there he is. You know, he's just same old Mike, you know, the same guy I met 12 years ago.
But change has occurred. It is symbolized by this elegant hilltop house of Michael's. At the age of 29, he's a wealthy man.
It was something that I've always wanted, was a house up on top of the hill and overlooking the town, and so this is a bit of a dream come true, I'd say.
His dreams have come true on the racetrack, too. The successes that have been the most satisfying are those he has shared with his family.
Well, that was a special moment. You know, I think, again, what made my championship special last year was the family aspect of the things that happened for us. You know, every one of us had something to celebrate last year. John won his first race. Jeff was Rookie of the Year at Indy and Rookie of the Year in a championship with the kart. And Dad was on the podium a few times with me, and he was there to celebrate with me at Laguna in the last race.
That championship-clinching race at Laguna Seca capped a lifetime spent around racing cars. His exceptional talent was spotted early by a racing legend who just happened to be his dad.
The first time I saw him drive a go-kart competitively, I said, you know, this kid just has something different. He was not race-wise because he didn't have the experience, but he just knew where he had to get to. He knew he had to get to the front. Something like this, to be aggressive, I don't think is something can be taught. It's good. It's here, inside.
At home, that aggressiveness finds its release on a golf course Michael has built. 6 holes, each a par 3, encircle the house, and he can play any time at his own pace.
Get over it. Ooh, yeah. One part of golf that I have a problem with is waiting, you know, for people in front of you, and this way we don't have to wait.
He waits for no one on the racetrack either, and his hard charging has brought him to the top. Michael Andretti, king of the hill, on the track and at home in Nazareth.
So Michael Andretti is under a lot of pressure in his struggle to catch Bobby Rahal as he goes into this race. But Sam Posey, there are other drivers feeling the pressure as well.
Well, exactly. Arie Luyendyk, for example, surely one of the best in the business, doesn't even have a ride for next year. And this may be his last chance this year to show how good he really is. Eddie Cheever, highly touted when he came from Formula One, in 2.5 years of IndyCar racing, has yet to win a race. He must win a race pretty soon. Even Penske's Paul Tracy, the sensation of this year, still must show that he can run fast and still finish the race. This is when deals start to be made for 1993. The next 3 hours could be crucial to these and to other drivers' futures.
500 miles is very tough on a racing engine. And Bobby Unser, this race is definitely a battle of the engines.
Well, Paul, this year has seen an engine battle between America's two largest manufacturers, Ford and Chevrolet. Now, Chevy began with the advantage because Ford's all-new engine was still very much under development, but Ford's first win came in just 5 races. And when you look at the field today, you see Ford in the first 4 places. In fact, the fastest Ford is 5 miles an hour faster than the Chevy, but this is a 500-mile race, the ultimate test. And when Ford has yet to finish a 500-miler, and if they can win today, Ford and not Chevy will be IndyCar Racing's new dominant engine.
In just a moment, we'll be back for the start of the engines in the Michigan 500.
Yeah, we're ready.
Back at Michigan International, another change for Michael Andretti. They have strapped him into his primary car. Carl Haas at the head of the car now begins to get that machine ready to go. They put it in order and pulled the backup car away. So Michael will race his primary, and we're ready for the command.
Gentlemen, start your engines!
Set and ready to go. As Michael Andretti, with much pressure already before the race has even started. 24 Indy cars have started their engines. We are ready to go racing. As the field began now to pull away, Danny Sullivan sits looking ahead, anticipating what this day may hold. So the field rolls away, 250 laps ahead. They will start in 12 rows of 2. Here's the starting field. On the pole is Mario Andretti through the 230-mile-an-hour barrier to earn his first pole since 1987. His son Michael is alongside, the only 2-time winner of the Michigan 500. In the second row, it's Eddie Cheever, who finished 4th in this event as a rookie 2 years ago. Outside is Arie Luyendyk, only the second start of the year for the 1990 Indy 500 champion. Inside the third row, Rick Mears, the defending champion of the Michigan 500. And Paul Tracy, Roger Penske's third driver, making his third start in a 500-mile race. Inside row number 4 is Emerson Fittipaldi. His first career win came on this race in 1985. Outside is Rahal Boisel. He finished 5th in the 1986 Michigan 500. Inside row 5 is Scott Goodyear, the runner-up at the Indy 500. And Pancho Carter, the winner of the inaugural Michigan 500 in 1981. Row 6 on the inside is Scott Pruitt, making his third start on this 2-mile super speedway. Bobby Rahal is outside, the current PPG IndyCar World Series point leader. Inside row 7 is Scott Brayton, one of only 2 drivers who have started every Michigan 500, and John Andretti, who finished 6th in last year's event. In the 8th row on the inside, Al Unser Jr., who won the 1990 Michigan 500, and Danny Sullivan, the 1988 champion. Row 9 on the inside is Tony Bettenhausen, who finished 2nd in 1981. And Buddy Lazier making his second start here. Row 10 to the inside is Jeff Wood, making only his third start in a 500-mile race. And Jan Beekes in his second Michigan 500. Inside row 11, Steve Chassie making his first Michigan start since 1989. And George Snyder making his 42nd start in a 500-mile race. In the 12th row, Canadian rookie Ross Bentley and the reigning Indy Lights champion Eric Bachelard. And the weather here at Michigan International, sun shining at the south end of the track, a little cloudy at the north end, 80 degrees, a slight chance of rain here, but we hope that comes after the run here today. And what's on the line? 250 laps to the 500 miles. Rick Mears, the defending champion, with a race record at 189.7 miles an hour. Let's go pit side. Jack Arute.
Well, Paul, let's keep you updated on the Michael Andretti situation. He is in his primary car, but they don't know if they have solved the problem. Behind me are all of the pieces that they took off the primary car, but what they decided to do is take the primary car and chance it. They just radioed to Michael, look, whatever you've got, that's what you're going to have to live with. Don't even bother to come into the pits if it begins to misfire. Stay out there for the points. Let's check in further up pit road with Gary Gerald.
Wear and tear on the banks, the bumps of the surface has been addressed early. It's a major concern. Ari Luyendyk in Indianapolis had a key suspension part break. The Ganassi team has made new push rods for this race, 30% stiffer than what they ran at Indianapolis, because they know you've got to be able to absorb 500 miles of punishment. They hope that bars like this in each corner of the car will keep Eddie Cheever and Ari Luyendyk in to the finish. Paul?
As the field now begins the parade lap, you take a look over Michael's shoulder, and the PPG pace cars ahead. They're the chassis in this race, of course, dominated by the Lola chassis. And, of course, the engines here as that battle continues. The Chevy Indy V8A, the dominant engine, but keep an eye on that Ford Cosworth XB engine. Former winners here at the Michigan 500. Well, of course, Rick Mears back in '91, going back through the order all the way to Pancho Carter, who was the first winner here. And thus far in this season, here are the winners of races so far as the season moves to its final quarter, and the points fight looks like it's going to be a great battle all the way to the end. So now, Bobby Rahal and Michael Andretti, the battle for the points, 3 wins each, but Rahal has been more consistent in finishing, though Michael has led more laps. On the backstretch, Johnny Rutherford drives the PPG pace car ahead. Just about a mile to go to the green flag now. The field nicely aligned. 12 rows of 2 instead of the traditional rows of 3 for a 500-mile race, owing to the 24 cars that have appeared for this race. And how's this for a view, huh? And there's Danny Sullivan as he prepares himself for the race. All the onboard cameras that you'll be watching here today. That's turn 3 just ahead at the end of the backstretch. The question mark, of course, is Michael Andretti. Is that engine prepared to go? On the pace lap for a moment, he hesitated just a bit, and then finally the car surged ahead and caught up with the pole sitter, his father, Mario Andretti. And you can see the pace now begins to pick up as they head for turn 4. Nick Finoro, the official starter of the IndyCar series, has the green flag in hand as here comes the field off of the 4th turn, and they align themselves heading for the green. Lined up, but not lined up great nevertheless. The green flag comes out, and look at the Andrettis as they head into turn 1. Mario down to the inside. Michael runs high and pulls a little bit ahead, and now Michael is well ahead as Michael Andretti takes the lead coming off of turn number 2. Down the backstretch, it's Michael, then Mario, then the 2 Ganassi cars, Luyendyk and Cheever. On the backstretch now, Michael Andretti pulls a bit away from his father. At the front of the field, no fight at the front. Here comes second place Mario as they head for the start-finish line. And they flash across that line with Michael Andretti in the lead of the race, followed by his father, then Eddie Cheever, Ari Luyendyk, Rick Mears, Paul Tracy, and the yellow flag comes out here on the very first lap. Right at the conclusion of the first lap, the yellow flag comes out, and no indication as yet as to why, but the yellow came out as Michael flashed across the line. Certainly no incident on the track. So Michael Andretti leads the first lap here in the Michigan 500. His father comes across in second place. Still under yellow, the call was for debris in the first turn. Michael Andretti cut the first lap at 213 miles an hour, 5 miles an hour faster than the same lap run by his father, the pole sitter. Here is the start as we take a look at it again as Michael, for the 7th straight race, leads the opening lap. Boy, look at him. If you had a question about whether or not there was a problem on that car, Well, that ought to resolve it, as Michael just simply drove away from his father in an identical machine. Let's go pit side and Jack Arute.
Paul, two things that came out of the drivers' meeting. The first they discussed at great length was the start of the race. At Toronto, Michael Andretti had a bit of a jump from the outside pole position. So they told him and cautioned him about jumping. They wanted the pole man to come across the stripe first. So Bobby Rahal turned behind and said, well, Mario, what are you going to do if he jumps the start? Mario deadpanned it and said, I'm going to cancel his allowance and I'm going to make him fly home commercial. Now, the second more important thing, the reason for this caution, Wally Dallenbach, the chief steward, cautioned everyone that because of extensive cracks like this one on pit road, well, they're out there on the racetrack, and what they found is they are giving up debris. And worried about puncturing a tire, he said, we'll use the caution even if we just have a doubt or an indication that there might be some debris. Let's go back to you.
So they went yellow almost immediately at the conclusion of the first lap. They now circle this track on lap number 3 under yellow.
The track is very rough, especially in turn 3, and both Andretti's reported early in practice when they went through turn 3, they got almost a splitting pain in their forehead, as if an arrow had hit them right in the forehead, something of the jarring of the car being transmitted into their head. So they may have a very long and painful day ahead of them.
So Nick Finoro tells the field they have one lap back to the green flag. Is this about the greatest shot you've ever seen? That's down on ground level in turn 1 as the field comes through.
Boy, it sure gives you an idea of how the guys get around this racetrack so fast. This is only a 2-mile track, 230-mile-an-hour qualifying, so there's the reason why, the steep banks.
Now, Michael Andretti at the head of the field. You see the pace car, its flashing lights ahead. Those lights will be switched off, indicating to Michael and the field that the pace car will head for pit road, and they will come back to green.
The plane that Mario Andretti said that Michael could not fly home on if he jumped the start is the family plane. And Michael told me an interesting thing when I was down in Nazareth this week. He said that plane has probably extended Dad's career a couple of years because it removes all the wear and tear of flying commercial.
Got a view of Scott Brayton there. In fact, you're looking out through the rear suspension of his car now. Brayton, who is from not far from here in Coldwater, Michigan, currently runs in 10th place. Two cars that are difficult to tell at distance. The difference between Michael and Mario, certainly. Mario has the red trim on his car, and just behind, Eddie Cheever and Arie Luyendyk. Luyendyk has yellow trim on his car. As the green flag comes out again, and we go back to racing at the start of lap number 5. And again, Michael is able to pull away from his father as they head into the high banks of turn number 1, working his way through that corner now. The rest of the field, as we see Eddie Cheever make a move on Mario Andretti. So Cheever moves into second place. Then Mario Andretti, then Arie Luyendyk. Rick Mears now runs in 5th.
You can see Eddie Cheever right there, Paul. He went right on by Mario. He's gaining confidence, especially in the oval tracks. He comes from road racing, but he's starting to look a whole lot better.
Mario Andretti runs in 3rd, now trying to catch up to Eddie Cheever, though Mario, a great veteran at 500-mile races, knows that the race is not won here in the opening laps, has given up his pole position to his son and dropped back into 3rd.
Mario is the biggest name currently in racing, along with Richard Petty. Now, Petty is retiring at the end of the year, and there are rumors that Mario will retire at the end of next year when his contract is up. I think we're going to really miss him. He's a man that's been around in this sport for 30 years, and there's no replacing Mario Andretti.
Oh, you can watch Michael, who's way out in front right now, pulled out a pretty good lead already. What he's doing, same thing he did in Indianapolis. He uses the low gear in the car, runs it really hard, gets a little bit of a buffer zone between him and whoever's in second place, shifts it to a higher gear. We call that the cruise gear. Now, he isn't cruising, but he definitely is making it easier on the engine.
The word cruise never applies to these cars. As on the backstretch now, there's Arie Luyendyk. You can see the difference in color on the little flip-up wings behind or in front of the rear wheels, as well as on the roll bar as compared to Eddie Cheever's car. Michael Andretti running laps now at 218.5 miles an hour. Fastest lap thus far in the race. Eddie Cheever's move on Mario Andretti just a few laps ago down to the inside and overhauled Mario, pushing him all the way out to the wall.
He pushed him pretty close too, Paul. He didn't really give Mario much room, and that at speeds like you're going here, 240 miles an hour down the straightaways, that's a little too close for Mario's comfort.
Running in 16th place, Danny Sullivan. Sullivan, as we keep an eye on this battle, which is Rick Mears, with Rahal Boycell moving inside him in a battle now for 6th place.
As Boycell begins to threaten Mears, it's extraordinary to realize that Rick, for once, was not among the favorites as we went into this races. He's won more 500-mile races than anyone currently racing. He's won 8 of them. And yet, because of the damage to his wrist at Indianapolis, it's not really considered that he has that strong a chance here today.
At the same time, this driver, Rahal Boycell, in one of the Dick Simon cars, has looked very strong since his reappearance in the series at Indianapolis this year. He's had some bad luck mechanically, had an engine go at Loudon, New Hampshire, and that took him out of the race. Rick Mears has not led a single lap on an oval at any time this season. At the front of the field, it is still Michael Andretti. You're on board now. Eddie Cheever is chasing. Michael just turned a lap again at 220 miles an hour. We'll be back after this message and a word from our ABC stations. Back at the Michigan 500, 14 laps complete. Michael Andretti a full 4-second lead over second place Eddie Cheever, and Michael continues to turn laps at better than 219 miles an hour as you see the top 5 and the interval back from the leader. We watch the battle now from Rick Mears and Rahal Boycell. It's a battle for 5th place. That's Mears just ahead. Boycell from time to time has been able to pull up alongside of Rick and then forced to drop back. This too is a fight between Arie Luyendyk and Emerson Fittipaldi, who moved around his teammate and into 5th place, and now they battle for 4th position. A couple of cars already out of the race. Canadian Ross Bentley reporting a gearbox down and George Snyder out. Jack Arute has an update on that.
Well, Paul, George Snyder has dropped out of the race. He did start this Michigan 500, but come here. He works for A.J. Foyt, and George Snyder has now taken over as the fuel man for A.J. Foyt's car driven by Pancho Carter. George, it's a lot of double duty for you today.
Well, now I got to get to my real job, Jack, but it was fun while it lasted out there, so now we'll try to help Pancho.
Let's update you as well on the condition of Mario Andretti's car. He is having problems on the pop-off valve. They're still trying to dial it in.
Mario Andretti, his fastest lap thus far is 2:15 as we watch this battle. Rahal Boycell continues to battle with Rick Mears. Mario's fastest lap has only been at 216, so he's 4 miles an hour off the pace of Michael.
Well, you can watch as Boycell working on Rick Mears right there. Now, he can really pass him. He gets a draft behind him. He pulls up alongside, but he doesn't go quite on by, just like right there. He could have gone by. What it is Rahal has become a lot better race driver, and he realizes this is really 500 miles long.
Rahal really learning his way around these ovals and doing a spectacular job at it as he battles with the best in the business, Rick Mears, on a track that is the Penske test track. Rick knows this perhaps better than the Indy 500 Speedway.
Boycell delivering another one of the top flight performances. You see him there make a bid again. He set Rick up beautifully, but again, not quite enough go to get by. But this has been a year in which Boycell has proven that he could run with the really big names of IndyCar racing.
Contrasting the two styles as they're on the backstretch. The 11 car Rahal Boycell, remember, originally came in to replace Hiro Matsushita. Rick Mears there with the Chevy B engine. And actually, they've changed the rear of that car a bit this race, has many of the people speculating because the rear cowling is a bit higher than at Indianapolis, that actually many of the components for the newly announced Chevrolet C version engine are running in all 3 Penske cars this weekend.
Well, Paul, what they're trying to do a lot on that car is to find out if the problems with the lack of speed of it has been the engine or the car itself. Now, they've changed a lot of aerodynamics on that car right there, too, which is Mears' car, but they've changed also the front nose. They're putting more air by the front nose into the side pods or into the downforce on the car.
Fight for second place now. Mario Andretti as he's trying to close on Eddie Cheever. So a fight for second place developing as we go inside and Gary Gerald.
Interesting, Paul, that the race pace from Chip Ganassi's mind is a little slower than what they expected. These laps around 219 miles per hour. He says that both of his drivers, Luyendyk and Cheever, are experiencing a push. They'll, of course, address that on the first pit stop, try to improve the handling. At this pace, while we think it's fast, a little slower than they expected early.
So Michael Andretti has just lapped in a mere 22 laps the 1988 winner of this race, Danny Sullivan, who runs in 16th place, still struggling with that car out of the Gallus-Craco operation. Bob.
Yeah, the speeds, Paul, are a little bit slower than we expected, you're saying, but what that's caused by is just simply knowing that it's 500 miles, and this, without doubt, is the toughest track in the entire circuit.
Now remember, this car, as Al Unser Jr.'s, is a Galmer. It's the chassis that won the Indianapolis 500, Bobby.
Yes, it is, but they've had an awful lot of trouble, especially at high-speed places. The car is quite quick on road surfaces.
Scott Goodyear, as he challenges now Rick Mears. Goodyear came up, moved past Rahal Boycel just a second ago, and is now charging at the back of Rick Mears.
You know, Scott Goodyear had that phenomenal second place at Indianapolis, and he was able to back it up with a third place in New Hampshire. But still, as you see him now making a bid here, there was a sense that the momentum created at Indy has not been sustained. He, like the other guys I spoke of just before the race started, is a guy that needs to pick momentum up again now before the end of the season, and he's doing it now.
And Paul, keep another thing in mind about Rick Mears. Scott Goodyear right behind him there. He always starts out in these 500-mile races slow. He'll adjust his chassis when he comes in for the first pit stop. And if his arm, his right wrist is not giving him problems, he'll become a terror later on the race.
Yes, but right now he's 23 seconds back of the leader, which is quite a bit to have dropped back, Bob.
On the backstretch once again, now Goodyear sets Rick Mears up, comes way low, working a good solid low line. Rick Mears has been working the high line, and now Scott Goodyear moves into 6th place as he gets around Rick Mears. So Rick Mears fighting some problems here, and now down below, look at Paul Tracy. Paul Tracy, who was able to move up and join this battle as well, and now he battles with Scott Goodyear. So Paul Tracy is on the charge.
Now you watch a drafting thing with two cars together like that. Scott Goodyear took the benefit of two cars ahead of him. The draft becomes pretty good, and that's how he was able to shoot by so fast there.
Rick Mears is only 8 seconds from being lapped. Now here are the two young men who really put their names on this season. Paul Tracy with his dazzling battles with Michael Andretti at the road courses of let's see, Detroit and Toronto, and of course the terrific second place by Scott Goodyear at Indianapolis. Goodyear on the left, Paul Tracy in the center of the screen now.
And of course both of them Canadians. Now what about Rick Mears? Let's get an update on him from Jack Arute.
Well, Paul, Rick Mears has radioed in that the car is pushing badly, much the way Gary Gerald reported on the Lyondike and Cheever cars. But what they're trying to do is tough it out until the first pit stop. In fact, Mears will now be bringing his car onto pit road, and they will be making a wing adjustment. He'll be the first of the leaders to pit.
Fastest lap of the race thus far was turned on lap 17. Here comes Rick Mears into the pits now. Michael turned it at 221.1 miles an hour. So Rick Mears, with his problems, rolls down toward the Penske pits.
And he's definitely in too early.
Let's go down to that pit, and Jack.
They have made the wing adjustment on the front wing only. They've remained steadfast with the change the wicker bill on the rear of the car. They're filling it up with fuel. So all it is a front wing adjustment to adjust the push on the car, gentlemen.
13.9 seconds for that adjustment. Rick Mears in and out.
The danger right now, of course, he's in earlier than normal. He adds that the track would go yellow right now. Rick would lose a lap, but it hasn't gone yellow yet. The gamble might be all right.
And no particular reason as to why it should, as Michael Andretti and his #1 machine continues to lead this race and is pulling away now a full 13 seconds ahead of second place Eddie Cheever.
Since Michael Andretti won his first IndyCar race, which was Long Beach in 1986, he has won more races, led more laps, scored more points, and taken more poles than any other driver. It's quite a claim.
Michael Andretti, without question, at the top of his form. Just in front of him is the Indy 500 champion, Al Unser Jr., trying to keep from being lapped. But there's no chance of that because Michael is flying.
Now, he came off the turn about the same speed as little Al, and just look at the difference as he went down the straightaway. Now, that's horsepower. The Fords probably have a good 10-mile-an-hour speed down the straightaway over the Chevrolets, at least the Chevrolet A engine, Paul.
Well, Bobby, you raised the issue at the beginning of the show that this was really the battleground between Ford and Chevrolet. And Fords are currently running first, second, and third. It isn't until you get to Emerson Fittipaldi in fourth that you get a Chevrolet.
And Paul Tracy makes his move now on Arie Luyendyk, gets around Luyendyk and picks up 6th place. So Luyendyk beginning to fall steadily backwards while Tracy is on a charge forwards. And now here is the fight renewed between Rahal Boisel and Rick Mears, though remember Rick did go into the pits, and it is not a battle therefore for position, but it's the same old rivals out on the racetrack itself.
But it's a good time, Paul, to see whether they fixed Rick's car a little bit or not.
Michael Andretti just picked up the pace. He just turned the last lap at 221.5 miles an hour, the fastest lap thus far in the race. The average speed of the race, despite the early yellow, has come up now to 181.6 miles an hour. The race record here for a 500-mile race, for any IndyCar 500-mile race, 189.727 miles an hour.
This is the most terrific view. It's a new camera position, as you can see from the graphic, on board with Scott Pruitt in that terrific True Sports car. And you see, for the first time, to my eyes anyway, Bobby, I want to see what you think, the way it really feels when you're driving a car. This is what you see.
It's certainly a lot better than we've ever seen before, and it's a realistic view, Sam.
So Michael Andretti is out in front. Again, he just upped the ante to 222 miles an hour, a new fast lap in the race, and in doing so, he passed his nemesis, Bobby Rahal. So Michael Andretti has put all but the front 9 cars a lap behind the leader with just 33 laps done. Back at the Michigan 500, we are under yellow. Michael Andretti is in the pits. Jack Arute.
And Paul, very quickly, they're doing their service. They have made a minor wing adjustment on the front wing only. He also complaining of some understeer. Likewise, his father, who will pit shortly, will make a wing adjustment on the front, and he will change the wicker bill because his car is pushing worse.
That's Ari Leyendijk heading back into the action. This is his teammate, Eddie Cheever. He is the reason for the yellow right in the middle of the backstretch. Coming off of 2, he glanced the wall and finally slid to a stop at this position, which is just about the middle. This was just a few moments ago. And Eddie Cheever, as he climbed out of that race car, terribly frustrated with whatever happened. Look at that. Angry, mad Eddie Cheever.
Well, it's very possible that he feels that he had a flat tire, that he ran over something and punctured a tire.
He badly needed a success here. He was running second, driving an incredibly ambitious race. You see the view here from Scott Brayton's car as he comes into the pit.
So Scott Brayton heads down on the pit road, not running where he'd like. He is in 9th place, a lap behind the leader, as he rolls in from service for Dick Simon's team. See that grandstand just off his view to the right? It is filled with Amway folks, supporters. Of course, Amway located not far from here, and everyone in that stand seems to be wearing those bright pink colors of Scott Brayton's car. Now Scott, having to maneuver out a little bit to get into the lane, rolls back into the action, and Pancho Carter is into the pits, but it looks like this may be a little more lengthy stop. Some debris there on the car, and finally he gets away. Paul Newman watches as Michael Andretti circles this track. Well, the IndyCar drivers and their cars get a pretty serious workout running 500 miles here at Michigan. Danny Sullivan tells us how this race can be a real handful in this week's Tips from the Cockpit.
Here at Michigan, of course, it's a 500-miler, so we directly compare that to Indianapolis. This is a much more physical racetrack. The straightaways are much shorter. You're in the banking for a lot longer. The corners are really continuous. 1 and 2 are continuous. High bank, I believe, 26 degrees. Same at 3 and 4. And you're in there for a long time. It also is more than a one-groove racetrack. You'll be down there 2 and 3 cars abreast, sometimes 4 abreast in a traffic situation. And you're in those corners for a long time, pulling a tremendous amount of G-load. It's very easy, if your car is working good here, to run wide open with the throttle the entire way around. The problem is, after 250 laps, it takes a tremendous toll on the car. Gearbox, engine, sometimes you're bouncing the car off of the ground a little bit. You're getting more RPMs than you want to. It is a real problem physically for the car. The big thing is getting the car to run over the bumps. That is very physical. You'll see in your in-car cameras where everybody's moving around a lot of movement from the head. It's very difficult to see far around the corner because of the movement and the car bouncing around. And this is going to be a problem throughout the race. When I won here in 1988, about 10 guys took off at the beginning of the race, and for the first 20 or 30 laps or 50 laps, they ran at a tremendous pace. And then everybody started backing up, having problems, cars braking. I think that the winner here is going to have to drive a conservative race. That doesn't mean he's not going to be fast or be the guy out in front, but he's going to have to be conservative on his equipment.
Many of the drivers here have been complaining about headaches after practice because the track is so physical and rough. There is Eddie Cheever's car on the hook as they clear the track on the backstretch. Those are the marks into the wall coming off of 2 that were the result of Cheever's incident with the wall. So Eddie Cheever out of the race along with Eric Bachelard, Ross Bentley, and George Snyder, though Eddie Cheever is the first incident of the day after 40 laps at the Michigan 500. Welcome back to the Michigan 500. I'm Paul Page, and we are under yellow because of Eddie Cheever's accidents. One of the 4 Ford engines out of the battle as a result of an impact with the wall. And Gary Gerald is with the car owner, Chip Ganassi.
Indeed we are, Paul. And Chip, you had a quick radio conversation with your driver, and it's not the kind of conversation that you as an owner ever want to hear.
No, I'll tell you, Gary, we were looking for a yellow. There was something else going on out there, and suddenly they yelled for a yellow, and I said, yellow, yellow, on the radio. Eddie said, I think something broke. I hope I don't hit anything. And he's going, whoa, 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 whoa. He said, oh, I'm out, but I'm okay. So fortunately, he's okay. That's the important thing. And we got to get Ari's car working now.
Now I think I've got more bad news because I'm just told that Ari's going to get a stop-and-go penalty. I don't know if it was for running over a hose, running over an air hose, we're told. So if you'll turn around, I expect you're going to see your other driver here in just a moment.
Well, fortunately, it's a 500-mile race. We got a long way to go. Anything can happen.
All right, thanks, Chip. Paul?
And of course that penalty actually will be assessed after they go back to green flag racing. Sandy Andretti keeping track of Michael's progress in the pit area, and Michael's progress has been stellar. 220 miles, 222 miles an hour, his fastest lap in the race. Prior to the yellow, he had a long lead over second place Mario Andretti. They will line up coming back to the green flag. Michael, then Mario, then Scott Goodyear, then Emerson Fittipaldi, then Paul Tracy, John Andretti, Rahal Boycell, Arie Luyendyk, Bobby Rahal, and Scott Pruitt. Overhead today, the shots courtesy of the Goodyear blimp Stars and Stripes, sporting Goodyear's new corporate blue and yellow colors. Piloting the blimp today is Jim Maloney from Vienna, Virginia. And I'll tell you what, those overhead shots give you some great idea of the separation between some of the battles on this track. The pace car comes off onto the pit road, and we're ready to go racing once again as they scream across the line. Michael Andretti, the leader of the race, and we're back to green flag racing. Can they close on Michael Andretti? Can he be caught on this day at Michigan? Michael working down to the inside. Only 3 cars actually run on the lead lap, and Michael seems to be able to drive about anywhere he wants. That's Emerson Fittipaldi just ahead of him, trying desperately to keep Michael from getting past him. Fittipaldi runs in 3rd place.
Well, the idea is don't get down a lap or laps. Rick Mears is on further ahead on the same deal. Rick is going like heck right now to keep from letting Michael put another lap on him, Paul.
Rick Mears not really a factor at this point, though. He's running in 15th place.
Emerson Fittipaldi began the season with a win, followed by a pair of thirds, but he's been out of the money 4 out of the last 6 races, and he badly needs to reverse this downward slide. That, of course, was the stop and go for Eddie Cheever, which we knew was coming up for Arie Luyendyk, I'm sorry, and obviously, as Chip Ganassi said, it's a lucky thing it's a 500-mile race.
Rahal Boycell and Paul Tracy battle. Good little fight here.
One of the big secrets about trying to win this race, of course, is not get down laps. And that, again, that's what Rick Mears is trying to do. He had a problem. He pitted under the green, and didn't turn yellow. He got a little bit behind. Just like that stop-and-go penalty is really going to hurt Luyendyk. You just don't want to get down laps.
What we actually have is a 3-way battle now for 5th place. John Andretti, that bright yellow car, was sitting in 5th, and he's being chased by both Paul Tracy and Rahal Boycell, though the battle for the moment has broken off just a bit. There's Boycell once again, and there's John Andretti with Paul Tracy just ahead of him. So Paul Tracy for the moment has overhauled 5th place, but John Andretti is not going to let that one go that easy. As John Andretti comes back and takes the position, but here comes Paul Tracy once again.
The typical finish for John Andretti this year has been a 5th or 6th, and the talk is, why can't he break into the lead position? Look at this battle. It's certainly not a shortcoming of the driver, and it's really hard to say, is it a shortcoming of the team headed up by Jim Hall? It just seems they're lacking some ingredient. They're going to be sticking together again next year. Chances are they will find it in due course, but they're getting impatient. They want results.
Well, you look at these two, an ongoing battle for 5th place. Paul Tracy, for the first time driving in a 92 mark Penske machine, and of course John Andretti in a Lola. Chevrolet powered up on the high side, and they just keep at one another. Now traffic lies ahead. That will be a factor, as Tracy for the moment has the slot.
Boy, side-by-side racing, but Paul Tracy now, Penske is his boss. Penske wants him not to necessarily go super fast this race, but get the experience. Learn how to work traffic. Learn how to work the air that the other cars causing problems. Get the experience.
Jeff Wood with a problem. He has been in the pits 3 times already, and he heads into the pits once again. Let's go down pit side. Jack Arute.
Well, actually, Paul, it's
I'm sorry, Gary.
That's all right. Eddie Cheever has made his way back now, and Eddie, obviously, you seem to be okay. Can you tell us what happened? Did you have any indication?
No, I had something break in the right rear, and I don't know what it was. I mean, the first time I went to the men's room in Indy, there was something written on the wall that had, there's 2 types of Indy drivers, those that have hit the wall and those that are going to hit the wall. I am now officially an Indy driver. It was very unfortunate. My target car was running well. Michael was very quick to begin like he normally is.
Michael Andretti in trouble as he rolls into the pits. Michael Andretti slow into the pit area, comes to the Newman Haas pit. His team is there, and Michael Andretti could have his day done. Let's go to Jack.
Well, Paul, it's unbelievable. What he radioed in was, my God, it almost feels like what happened at Indianapolis. Remember there, the engine just stopped, and it was the belt itself. The engine is quit. It's deathly quiet here in Michael Andretti's pit, and they are not sure what the problem is, but they do now know that he is out of the hunt for the win. Let's go back to you.
Well, Paul, this is one time again I want to tell people it is not Michael's fault. He's not driving the car too hard. He's cruising the car. It's just that they have a lot of speed. They found things that the other drivers and other teams cannot find, but he's definitely not the culprit.
And in that battle of engines that you mentioned at the start of this race, Bobby, now 2 Fords out. One Eddie Cheever's due to the impact with the wall, and if they can't get this one going, then Michael's engine is gone.
Boy, but did you ever see an advantage much better than what those cars have had on this race right now?
Michael, perhaps watching the championship drift away from him.
Well, he was in such a good position to really close up on Bobby Rahal. He started the race 34 points behind him. He was, of course, leading the race, which would have been worth 20-plus points to him. Now, of course, he hands the lead to his dad, Mario. Could this be the long-awaited victory for Mario?
Boy, I would love that. Mario, at the moment, the lead he was handed is a full 26 seconds over the second-place now car of Scott Goodyear.
Yeah, I think there's Mario Andretti right on the track now, Paul. I think that if Mario were to be able to win this race, he would certainly be the crowd favorite. It's been so long. And at times, he is just awesomely fast.
And, of course, with Michael dropping behind the fight, that gives the advantage to some cars that had been lapped, and now there are 7 cars back on the lead lap. Let's go back to Jack Arute.
Paul, you're talking about Mario Andretti. He is not without his concerns out on the racetrack. He has been constantly having problems with the pop-off valve. Now, there is an onboard display that tells you exactly the exact amount of boost you're getting, but they are not actually able to dial it in as it applies to what's being displayed on the dash. He's constantly popping it off and having to go back to the old tried and true method of hearing it in your ear from the tube that's positioned back by the valve itself. So he is concerned as they continue to work on Michael Andretti's car here, and they still don't know what the problem is there. So this is a tough day for Newman Haas.
Well, you know what happens on those pop-off valves often is they do pop off the first time. They blow out very hot air.
Bobby Rahal charging on Rahul Boisel, a fight for 6th place.
And then as the air goes through the pop-off valve, it heats the spring up. The spring gets weaker, and then it starts popping off at a lower pressure. And of course, for every inch, they lose about 20 horsepower, and that really is costly.
Last year, when Michael Andretti dropped out of the Michigan 500, Bobby Rahal turned it on. He said, this is my chance to win and really extend my lead. Like this year, he was leading in the championship at that point last year. He turned it on, he really flew, and then he blew up too.
Back at the Michigan 500, a battle for second place between Emerson Fittipaldi and Scott Goodyear. As look at Scott Goodyear as he inches further and further forward, ready to challenge Emerson Fittipaldi. Mario Andretti is still the leader of the race, but look at Scott Goodyear. In just a few turns, he's able to come right back on the back end of Emerson Fittipaldi. Now he moves to the inside, and Scott Goodyear picks up second away from Emerson Fittipaldi, doing so cutting laps at 218.5 miles an hour, 3 miles an hour faster than the leader Mario.
Now there's a Canadian that came from road racing that nobody thought was very good on the big ovals. Second place in Indianapolis today, going like a house on fire. Really getting the ovals figured out good.
And he drives for this man, Derek Walker, who had 2 drivers in the race, but Jan Beekes is already out. Let's go down to Jack Arute.
Well, it goes without saying, a very disappointed Michael Andretti. Early reports are it's the same problem as what happened at Indianapolis.
Seems like it. It just quit. It seemed like just lost oil pressure and fuel pressure, just like Indy, and I can't believe it.
The feelings that you have, especially starting the race with the unknown quantity, and now all of this happening and trying to close on Bobby Rahal. Describe it.
It's not a very nice feeling. That's about all I can say. You know, it's just it's a shame because I thought we got over the hurdle by getting the car out there, and I thought maybe this is going to be our day, and you know, it was going to be our day up until you know, the thing quit. It's just very disappointing.
Tough break for Michael Andretti.
John Andretti and Bobby Rahal now battle for 5th place.
But just to explain Michael's problem that he thinks he has, it's a belt that drives the oil pump, the fuel pump, and the camshafts, and etc. on the front of the engine, Paul. That's what broke at Indianapolis. It slowly was out of a line, wore off to the side of it, and finally broke. And it's not likely it's the same problem now, but it sure does sound like it.
So John Andretti, as he comes alongside the troubled Rick Mears, Bobby Rahal is right behind him, a continuing battle for 5th place. But you can see that the failure of Michael Andretti seems to have given all new life to Rahal.
There's Rick Mears going by there, having a very frustrating and probably painful day, but it is an inspired drive for John Andretti. This is the highest he's run this early in a race this year.
On board now, Al Unser Jr., who is 1 lap behind the leader, running in 9th place. Now take a look at the telemetry that we have. Chevrolet providing this information off of their fantastic racing engine. Look at the RPMs come up and down as he uses the throttle. Look especially at lateral G's here.
Yes, and Paul, you know, normally the engine would be turning like 12,400. Look at how much they cut it back for a 500-mile race. If you don't do it, they just won't take it for a 500 miles here at the Michigan track.
As he turns into the corner, of course, there's a little lag on the data link between the actual video that we see and as the yellow comes out here, we should see him get out of the throttle. And there is Rick Mears coming into the pits. Let's go to Jack Arute.
And this is a break for Rick Mears, gentlemen, because now they are making major changes on the car. And the yellow flag is underway, so they're being able to do it with a little bit more leisure. They have changed the front wing, and they have also changed the wicker bill. This is very reminiscent of what Rick Mears did, trying to chase the racetrack all last year when he was victorious. Let's go back to you.
Buddy Lazier in the pits as well. Brand new sponsor on that car. The new Hemmelgarn team, after leader card, has finally, after years, pulled out of racing. So the yellow is apparently for a debris on the track. No obvious incident here. And as we watch Mario, the leader of the race, roll down into the pit area. Now this should be a routine stop. Jack is right there.
Well, Paul, they are again going to try and make a wing adjustment on Mario Andretti because he is also trying to adjust the handling on the car. Now there's a little bit of miscommunication, but they have completed the work. A big change on the front wing, but he is off and away.
16.5 seconds, he's out. Major change to the front wing of Mario Andretti's car. Hopefully they have dialed some new speed back into it. So far he's only run at 215 miles an hour. We'll be back.
This Track Fact is brought to you by Ford and your Ford dealer. Have you driven a Ford lately?
On super speedways, IndyCars will hit speeds in excess of 230 miles per hour. And as you might imagine, that kind of wind in your face can create some serious buffeting for the driver. What teams do to alleviate that problem is raise the windscreen just a little bit to help deflect the wind over the head of the driver. But that can also create a problem. It creates a vacuum that just wants to suck the helmet right off the head of the driver. So now the helmet manufacturers are coming into play by putting trip strips and vortex generators on top of the helmet. What that does is break up the wind as it passes over the top of the helmet, keeping it securely on the driver's head and hopefully making the ride a little more comfortable at 230.
Still under yellow at Michigan. Mario Andretti, the leader of the race. Almost everyone has made their second stop of the day. Right after this race, of course, we'll have coverage of round number 3 of the International Race of Champions, as some of the finest drivers in the world and equal and matched Dodge Daytonas run against one another, held right here at Michigan International Speedway. You'll want to stay tuned for that.
You know, Paul, I just wanted to mention that on the yellow that first came out, Buddy Lazier and Rick Mears came in almost right after it went yellow. Now, Mike, keep a watch. They made a mistake. They should have stayed out, helped close up on the leader, who's Mario Andretti. They would have picked up a lap. Instead, they pit too early, and then they actually lose a lap.
Keeping track of his driver, Bobby Rahal, is Carl Hogan. Bobby runs in 7th place under the yellow.
Bobby's director of operations, Larry Randlett, calls Bobby Rahal the throttle actuator. And he says, well, he's the best in the business. I think that's a pretty good quote.
Danny Sullivan, the Gallus Craco operation. By the way, the Craco part as a partner will be going away at the end of this season. Maury Cranes, who has suffered from a bad back for some time, saying that that's just taking its toll and he can't really do his job as a co-owner, so he's going to bow out for a while, and Rick Gallus is going to take over the total operation. Back to green flag racing once again as they scream toward the green flag, and down in turn number 1. Mario Andretti, the leader of the race, followed by Scott Goodyear, Paul Tracy, John Andretti, Bobby Rahal, and Royal Boiselle, and Scott Pruitt is lined up just behind the leader.
Now remember, Mario's having some problems with the pop-off valve. We watched Scott Pruitt drive by him before the last yellow flag came out. Mario is definitely lacking in horsepower. Let's watch now and see what happens from that.
The fight between John Andretti and Bobby Rahal, an ongoing fight now for 4th place after almost everyone in the field, in fact everyone who matters, has completed their second stop of this 500-mile race. 72 laps are now complete. Scott Brayton sits just ahead of this fight, should become a factor any second now.
When you watch Rahal and John Andretti right there, you look at the 2 light cars. There goes Rahal by him. You're looking at A engines, the Chevrolet A engines, and both Lola chassis there.
It's interesting that Rahal, the minute Michael Andretti went out, did seem to come alive. He'd been languishing back in 12th. Now he's up into 5th.
So Bobby Rahal, moving toward the front of the field, is solidly around John Andretti and solidly into 4th place. His next target will be Paul Tracy, who is not that far ahead. Mario Andretti still the leader. Scott Goodyear in 2nd, Paul Tracy 3rd.
The yellow caution really bunched things up. There are now 7 cars on the lead lap, and all of them battling.
Paul Tracy trying to close down on Scott Goodyear. You see Scott Goodyear, that blue and silver car just ahead. The blue and white mobile car, well, that's Paul Tracy. A 1992 Penske, the first time he's had a chance to drive it. As we take a look at sitting in front of him is Scott Pruitt. Mario Andretti is just ahead of this battle. So the yellow bunching everyone up.
There's little Al. Obviously got the car working a little bit better than they had in practice, but still not as fast as he'd like to be. By the long ways.
And Arie Luyendyk and Paul Tracy side by side. But remember, Luyendyk was assessed a penalty and is running off the leader's pace.
I remember Paul Tracy right there on your left had a problem last year. Started the race, promptly hit the wall right for Roger Penske. Everybody painted kind of a bad picture for him, but so far this race, he's really been using good judgment, going fast, and yet staying out of trouble.
Penske car is running in 3rd place, and then Fittipaldi is back in 15th with Rick Mears running 11th. An update on the Penske operation, Jack Arute.
Well, Paul, Tim Bumps is actually calling the shots along with Teddy Mayer on the Paul Tracy car. And one of the things that they've discovered is Tracy has got a slight push to his car, and he likes it. He has asked him to keep it in the car. I asked Tim Bumps what his biggest concern is. He said, right now we're trying to talk Paul through the race. We're trying to keep him calm. We're trying to remind him that this is 500 miles. Another problem has also befallen his teammate Emerson Fittipaldi. He was on pit road for several laps with what they first thought was a CV joint that had gone bad. But over the constant velocity joint is a rubber boot, and that boot had gotten hung up, it partially melted, and that was creating a slight vibration in the car. Back to you.
Most of the races in the IndyCar series are at 200 miles. Only twice in the year do they race at 500 miles. Indianapolis and here. Bobby Unser, there is a world of difference when they talk about teaching a guy like the driver of the 7-car, Paul Tracy, between that 200th and 500th mile. You really have to learn how to drive it.
Well, they're geared up. Their minds are geared up to be fast, to be really, really fast. And in Michigan right here, if you drove what we call a trophy dash for 500 miles, Paul, you're just going to tear up the car and break it.
Paul Tracy challenged Al Unser Jr., who is also running a lap behind the leader, running in 8th place right now. But Little Al was having none of it. Now Tracy is back at Little Al once again as they run very, very close. And Little Al brings it down off of turn 2 and forces Paul to drop back just a bit.
Let's not forget that Little Al won Indianapolis just a couple of months ago. So this is the man who won the last 500-mile race they have run. And Paul Tracy is challenging him.
And also keep in mind, Sam, they've had an awful lot of trouble at the high-speed places with the Galmer car. The fact that he won Indianapolis, a whole bunch of it was luck and a lot of hard work by the crew. One of the hardest working, dedicated crews in Indianapolis that I've ever seen, because they technically didn't have a chance of winning.
Well, they managed to make the cars mechanically bulletproof. They just don't quite have the speed. And, of course, with Little Al and Danny Sullivan, they have two of the very best drivers in the business. And these men just keep at it lap after lap and using their race savvy through a long 500-mile like this. Tracy, of course, got by him, but this battle goes on.
Steve Chassie and Jan Beekes both reporting out of the race. And also now Pancho Carter driving for A.J. Foyt, the first winner of the Michigan 500, out of the race. The leader is still Mario Andretti. He's turning laps at 215 miles an hour, not nearly the torrid pace set by his teammate, Michael, who ran a lap at 222 early in the race on lap 32.
And also keep in mind that Mario has problems with his pop-off valve. That cannot be fixed during a race. If that's a problem, that's not something that they can change, Paul.
Evidently, though, he had big handling problems, too, judging from the amount they changed that front wing. If those can be made to go away, perhaps he can hang on.
So keeping an eye on Mario Andretti, as there is Scott Goodyear pulling up right behind him now, and Scott Goodyear has been running about 3.5 miles an hour faster than Mario on the past few laps. So will this be a pass for the lead? Scott Goodyear beginning to challenge the leader of the race now. They're up in the north end of the track, coming off at turn 4 and down toward the tri-oval as they flash toward the line.
We could see history about to be made. Scott Goodyear, under a real green flag situation, has never led a 500-mile race. And right now, he's got Mario Andretti in his sights. The old fox leading the young charger.
Boy, don't you know that the Canadians up in Canada are really jumping right now? This is the Canadian boy going by.
And he goes for the lead, and Scott Goodyear moves down inside Mario Andretti. A classic battle. Rookie and veteran, they're side by side. In the north end of the track, Scott Goodyear takes a run coming off the corner. Careful, though, not to pinch Mario Andretti up to the wall. But Mario hangs on to the lap.
Mario has got the experience. Scott is the brave guy, the brave Canadian. You can bet you that Jim O'Donnell, the guy that sponsors that car, is jumping up and down right now.
A tremendous battle for the lead. There is the owner, one of the co-owners of the other car. This is Derek Walker, who owns and runs Scott Goodyear's stable, as Mario Andretti is still trying to hold the young Goodyear off in an ongoing rotating battle around this track for the lead of the Michigan 500.
I have to laugh at Carl Haas. It's old poker face. He acts like he's bulletproof, and yet down deep he has more feelings than most guys I know.
So Mario Andretti, a very popular figure here at the Michigan 500, hoping for a win. It would be his first since the Cleveland race in 1988. But Scott Goodyear is up and trying to change all that.
You know, probably what happened right there is Derek Walker is talking to him. Derek, of course, has a tremendous amount of experience. Scott Goodyear's mechanic. He's probably telling him, hey, that's all right. Just pester him, keep him going, worry him a little bit, but don't make an issue out of it.
In fact, not only the tremendous experience of Derek Walker there, but
but guys like Laurie Garrish.
Oh, Laurie Garrish used to be my mechanic. Good man. Those guys are really good racers.
But it also proves that in making a pass, whether it's for the lead or just for position, you have to take a disadvantageous line, pinch the car down to get by. And Scott Goodyear did. Mario made him take that line. It can take a lap or two to build your momentum up, but he's built it up now.
Scott Goodyear knows that Rick Mears is sitting just ahead. They'll use him as an obstacle to work against. There's Mears' car. There comes Mario. And then Scott Goodyear continues in pursuit. Canadians right now with Paul Tracy running in third place are running second and third. On board the nose of Scott Pruitt's car, he runs in seventh place. Mario Andretti leads here at Michigan, but Scott Goodyear is on the challenge. At Michigan International Speedway, the battle continues, and it continues at the front of the field. An ongoing fight between race leader Mario Andretti and Scott Goodyear as the Canadian pushes past Mario Andretti. If he can hold on, he will lead his first lap in a 500-mile race. Scott Goodyear gets past Mario Andretti, and Scott picks up the lead.
Boy, you can watch when he went past Mario that you could see Scott's rear end just jumped out on his car, but he didn't quit legging it, Paul. He just kept going.
They continue the fight. Scott Goodyear is down low. Mario's having none of it as he runs up onto a high line and tries to take Scott Goodyear again. But Goodyear pulls away from Mario Andretti. His lap's just a little bit faster.
Now Scott's picking up a little bit of help. He's getting a little draft from the cars in front of him. That's helping him pull away from Mario a little bit easier there.
Scott Goodyear now with traffic just ahead, and he handles that superbly. Young man, in fact, I hitched a ride from Scott Goodyear with he and his wife, Leslie, as we were leaving Toronto. And he said, you know, you keep calling me a young Canadian. I'm 32 years old now. Maybe you shouldn't do that anymore.
He's very old compared to Paul Tracy, who's just 23. They think of themselves as the old and young Canadians, respectively.
So now Scott Goodyear, for the most part, has resolved his battle with Mario Andretti. Mario is now a half a second back, and look at him overhaul Rick Mears.
Well, he's just driving by Rick like he's parked. He is really moving, and I watch him work the traffic. He's going low, high, wherever he wants to go, he's sticking.
Well, Scott Goodyear's car is working, and that is the key. Also, perhaps that youth at age 32 will make a big difference in a hard race like this is today. Let's go to the pits of Gary Gerald.
An exciting moment for Derek Walker. You lead this 500 after that close finish at Indianapolis. What is the game plan at this stage, Derek? What are your concerns?
Well, it's a long way to go. So reliability right now is obviously our major concern. Other than that, the car's running fine, and Scott and the team and, you know, the McKenzie group are just doing what we have to do, just trying to stay up front.
It's hard not to conceal the smile at this moment, isn't it?
Well, I think it's great for the team and Scott to be doing this well. You know, we just hope it can continue, but, you know, it's a long way, and a lot of good guys still out there.
Anticipating any changes on your next stop here in the pit?
Just routine, just tires and fuel, really, at this stage.
All right, we watch. Thanks. Oh.
Rick Mears comes into the pits as well and begins to climb out of the car as you watch Scott Goodyear. They tell me that Rick Mears tomorrow will have that right wrist cast. And as a result, Rick Mears will miss a number of road races, and in fact may not be back in the race car until the race at Nazareth.
Think of the connection as we see Danny Sullivan come in between Derek Walker and Rick Mears. Rick Mears going out of the race. Derek Walker, who had been Rick Mears' crew chief and chief mechanic in many of Mears' successes. They both worked for Roger Penske, who you see there. Now fate has smiled on Derek Walker and not on Rick Mears on this day.
You know, Sam, I could watch Rick when he got out of the car's right wrist there. You can see how tender it is. He couldn't even get out of the car right, so he's really hurting from that. And I'm sure the car's the problem, but his wrist is definitely hurting him.
You see the brace that he wears.
I think in this situation, if you're Rick Mears, you say to yourself, I'm driving at a losing cause. Do I want to exacerbate the injury to my wrist by continuing to pound around this track? Maybe better to get out of the car.
Well, to my way of thinking, Rick Mears has shown tremendous courage just being in the car these past several races. He's taken some time off, but I don't think I would be in that car.
He's still the king of the ovals right now. Doesn't make any difference who else is running. He's the best. He's just got a lot of problems with his body.
Rick Mears, the defending champion, out of the race. His wife, Chris, right there as well. As now Mario Andretti comes back to challenge the leader of the race, Scott Goodyear. The battle resumes on the track, and Mario Andretti goes back to the lead. So somewhere there, Mario has found some speed. He's picked up his average. They're both running at 219 miles an hour.
Okay, now remember, Mario's still going to have that problem that he had before, but he does have the two gears of the transmission, the cruise gear and the go gear. Scott has probably came back to his cruise gear. Mario says, hey, I've got to go for a while. I don't have the horsepower, but he can turn the engine more RPM.
Oh, that battle is just ahead of Scott Pruitt, and from that periscope camera on the front of Scott's car, you got a sense as Mario Andretti tried to dart over. Scott Pruitt has that camera right in the middle of the fight for us. That's Fittipaldi just ahead. Now Scott Pruitt comes back around Scott Goodyear, who has picked the lead back from Mario Andretti. What a tremendous fight.
Well, that's real racing in there, Paul.
And remember, what they're feeling and that we are not seeing is the turbulence that comes off cars that are ahead of you. That affects the way you maneuver your car. Sometimes as you see Scott Goodyear here ripping by Emerson Fittipaldi, or at least challenging him, you have to realize that the turbulence around the cars very much affects what the drivers do.
Mario Andretti continues to close as Mario splits high around Fittipaldi and now challenges Scott Goodyear, but Goodyear, working the lower line, is able to hold on to it. And there comes Paul Tracy. Paul Tracy comes up and picks up second place. Now he challenges the leader of the race. A new battle for the lead, and it's Paul Tracy and Scott Goodyear. Two Canadians, and Paul Tracy moves into the front. But can he hold on to that? Goodyear's running a little faster line. Paul Tracy moves up, blocks just a bit, and Paul Tracy has the lead.
I think being a Canadian really brought some macho out of those two guys, Paul.
Paul Tracy just led that lap, which as far as I know is his first leading lap in a 500-mile race.
Paul Tracy, remember, crashed here at the end of lap 1 last year. Rick Mears is absolutely loving it. His teammate, Paul Tracy, in the mobile car, that beautiful blue and white machine, moves to the front around his fellow Canadian, Scott Goodyear.
Paul Tracy is without doubt one of the finest young new road racers I've ever seen come along. He really has a lot of talent. Now he's starting to show it on the big ovals.
And the Penske team is putting him in every position possible, not just on the racetrack, getting him more and more experience, but also in terms of PR. Yesterday afternoon, Jack Arute went and spoke to a group of enthusiasts, race enthusiasts. Paul Tracy was there chatting with them too.
If you ask the question, where are the stars of the IndyCar future coming from, this ought to show you. Now, this is the pass just a moment ago. That's from Pruitt's car, Mario to the outside. And there is Scott Goodyear running just ahead of him. That was the pass that made the difference for the lead. But watch, at this point, no sight of Paul Tracy at all. And suddenly he comes charging up to the center. Now, take a look at this. There's Scott Pruitt as he darts to the inside in that 10 car, getting alongside of Mario Andretti, then moves outside of Scott Goodyear as that battle for the lead continues. So obviously Scott Pruitt is handling well. We have Bobby Rahal in the pits. Gary Gerald is there.
Indeed, Rahal has been conservative by design. No wing changes. They changed the rubber, getting the full load of fuel. He's back underway. We've got him at 13 seconds as we go to Jack Arute.
Well, Gary, we've got Rick Mears, who's really been enjoying the last couple of dashes for the lead with your teammate. But first of all, what put you out?
Basically, the wrist did. You know, just it wasn't up to it. And, you know, we just wanted to give it a shot here. We'd given it a pretty good break beforehand, and just wasn't enough yet.
Paul, that's it from Rick Mears' pit.
Yeah, here at the 104th lap, Scott Goodyear comes in for his third pit stop of the day, and the crew falls on the car. Routine service rolls out in 14 and actually a little over 13 seconds there. And Scott Goodyear is back into the fight. Yet to stop is the leader of the race, now Paul Tracy, and now second place, Mario Andretti. So another series of routine stops. There is Danny Sullivan, who runs in 13th position, still just trying to keep that car alive and keep in the fight as he rolls out of the pits. Great shot of Danny as he heads for the first turn.
I talked to Danny just before the race to ask him what the problem was with the Galmers here, and he said that not going over the bumps good. The tires are not. It doesn't feel like it has a lot of downforce, Paul, and so that's his problem with it.
Paul Tracy hoping to finish today. He's had 3 consecutive DNFs. Did not finish since he ran 4th at Phoenix in April. But Paul Tracy, as the crew is ready for him, from last year where he crashed on the very first lap, now leading the Michigan 500, the Penske organization waiting for him, and he's carrying his pit stop further than most of the other leaders, though Mario Andretti is running in second place, a mere 2.5 seconds behind Paul. So this will become a battle of the pit crews. if they come in together, which tactically is what they should do. Here comes Paul Tracy in. And Mario Andretti comes in just behind him. So both the leaders, first and second place, in the pits right now. There's Mario Andretti as he rolls down. Paul Tracy, the crew already going to work on his car. Just 2 pits back is Mario Andretti's crew as they work on that machine. A battle within the crews, and you're talking 2 of the best teams that there are, Newman Haas and Penske Racing. And now they wait for fuel. Paul Tracy is down off the jacks. They're still waiting for fuel on Mario's car as Paul Tracy lights them up and heads out of the pit area in 16 seconds. Mario Andretti now down off the jacks and out of the pits as well. The leaders of the race both making stops under the green flag at exactly the same time.
I think those were just what you call 2 really good, perfect stops. No problem with either one of them. And they're just going to keep on racing. Mario doesn't have as serious a problem as he had earlier, but he's still going fast.
Paul Tracy has been turning laps just under 220 miles an hour. Mario Andretti is a bit back. John Andretti missed his pit the first time he came through, had to go all the way around the 2-mile track and back into the pits, and as a result of that, he dropped back to 6th place. So John Andretti has now completed his 3rd stop of the race. So all of those running on the lead lap, which is 1st through 6th, have completed their 3rd stop of the race. We'll have 108 laps of the 250 lap schedule.
Now what we want to watch for now is how the cars handle and how they go and compare to each other with their fuel full of fuel, Paul, because sometimes the guys don't handle as good full of fuel as they do when they're empty.
The battle between the 2 Canadians for 1st and 2nd, led now by Paul Tracy, with Scott Goodyear closing in ever so slightly as they pass the start-finish line.
We'll reset the order for you now. After the 3rd stops of the day, Paul Tracy leads. Scott Goodyear is back about a half a second. Then Mario Andretti in 3rd. Bobby Rahal is 4th. Raul Boisel is 5th. 109 laps complete as Scott Goodyear closes in on the back end of Paul Tracy's car. And once again, we have a battle for the lead. You talk about handling. Scott Goodyear on full tanks is handling very, very well.
Well, that's exactly what happens sometimes. The guy just likes full loads of fuels, and some of the guys like them when they're a little bit lower, almost empty. And you can see right there, Goodyear really likes the fuel.
Unbelievable pass for the lead for Scott Goodyear.
It all comes down to the weight that's in the car and the proportion front rear. Sometimes the more fuel in, Paul, makes them stick a little bit better because they weigh more.
Scott Goodyear just moved around Scott Brayton. Paul Tracy moves in to handle up Scott Brayton as well. And there you see that battle for the lead just ahead, broken off for just the moment. We'll be back after this message and a word from our ABC stations. Back at the Michigan 500, and what great stories may be told at the end of this day. Scott Goodyear perhaps scoring his first win in a 500-mile race. The same may be true for Paul Tracy. Or will Mario Andretti score his first victory since 1988? Bobby Rahal perhaps could move up to the top of the order and extend his battle in the points. Or Raul Boisel may win his first IndyCar race ever. It's a marvelous run at the Michigan 500. For the moment, the battle for the lead has broken off. Let's go to the pits. Jack Arute.
Paul, let's update you on what they did to Paul Tracy's car during that last pit stop. It was a very, and I repeat, very minor adjustment. It was like a half a turn on the left front wing. Now, why did they do it? They only wanted to trim things out because Tracy was reporting that the wind was beginning to buffet the car. But now they're trying to search for just that 1/10 of a second advantage. They're very pleased with the run by Tracy in his pits.
Well, Jack, and they should be.
Jack, the interesting thing, you had earlier reported that they had a little understeer in that car, and when they went to full fuel, it obviously made the car tough to handle for the first couple of laps, or at least that's what it looked like.
And Sam, remember, what they're trying to do is literally talk Paul Tracy through this race. He's encountering things now. He's run 500-mile tests here at Michigan International Speedway, but never with wind and the draft and all the things that go with a full field of cars. So they're actually doing a little remedial racing right now and describing the adjustments as the car evolves with full fuel loads.
They did the same thing for him at Phoenix earlier in the year, and he finished 4th.
There is a battle for 8th place as Arie Luyendyk moves around John Andretti, and here comes John Andretti right back. Let's go a little further down the pits, get an update from Gary Gerald.
Well, it's really been tough for John Andretti, Paul. He came in the same time that Andretti, that Mario, and the other leaders were coming in. He had been running in the top 5, but he came in simply too hot. He hit the brakes once, knew he couldn't make it in, had to continue down pit road. That error has shuttled him back now into a battle for 8th place with Arie Luyendyk. A costly move. Now he's got to try to regain all of that lost ground.
Costly move, but terrific battle. John Andretti is at the front of it at the moment.
You know, it's awfully hard for these drivers. Well, they've been out there running 230 miles an hour. Come into the pit sometimes and be able to slow down to a 0. It's really easy to overshoot the pit.
And there is Arie Luyendyk moving down inside John Andretti, continuing battle for 8th place. And John Andretti once again coming right back. They just seesaw the 2 positions. Both drivers having entirely different lines, giving one an advantage at one place, another in a different place.
Arie Luyendyk, of course, down on the inside in the red car, won Indianapolis 2 years ago. Everyone along pit lane has high regard for this man personally and professionally. The dice have not rolled his way in terms of getting a ride. We can certainly hope he will have a ride next year. And this, as I said earlier, may be his only chance to showcase his talent. John Andretti is short of a ride for next year, however. Those are in that team, the Pennzoil team headed up by Jim Hall, just trying to figure out what they need to do to elevate that team from a 5th and 6th place runner to a winner.
Well, they've changed some of their mechanics recently, Sam, and John's been running a little bit better. And I'm not knocking the old mechanics, but by the same token, often or sometimes when you change people, things change because they work harder.
Just in the chemistry of it. Not necessarily you get a better man, you just get a better fit into the organization with a different man.
Absolutely.
Well, if the Penske cars are to have a hope at this track, it's certainly in Paul Tracy. Emerson Fittipaldi running now in 14th place. Came in, they had to change a shock in the rear suspension of the car, so he is well behind the lead. And Mario Andretti slows it down. Running in 3rd place, Mario Andretti slows it down, and now only Arie Luyendyk is the hope for the Ford engine contingent. As Mario Andretti pulls it off the race course, his day is obviously over.
That's really bad for the Fords. You know, they've really made the horsepower in their engines, but they just don't seem to have the reliability. Now, of course, we don't know, but that's what's happened to Mario. It's an assumption when they quit here at Michigan that you have an engine problem.
Well, at Mario's age, you wonder how many more hurrahs, so to speak, he will have in his career. I know he has brought such passion, such totality of commitment, never let up in his 30 years of racing. You wonder how many more chances he has to win a race. It's really sad to see him drop out right here.
Mario Andretti's 40th DNF in 63 500-mile races.
Yes, and Paul, he certainly had a chance of winning this race today, all with the exception of his son. He had covered until he started having problems. So that's still a credit to Mario.
I was really pulling for Mario Andretti today. Let's go to the pits and Jack.
Well, Paul, there really isn't any news to report down here in Mario Andretti's pit. He was very quiet on the radio. He just said it stopped. And basically, they're all just beginning the picking up process now. One of the things that happens because of the new Ford engine, there are Ford Cosworth engineers, and they really deal with the inner workings of the engine. So they will have to download the information from that engine, and that will begin to isolate what the problem might have been. Until they do that and the car gets back here, it's everybody's question mark.
Paul Newman now with only a race to watch, both of his cars, Michael and Mario Andretti, out of the race. The rearward view from Scott Brayton's car. Look at that suspension flex and move as he comes around the track, and there's Scott Goodyear, the leader of the race, coming inside him. Paul Tracy sitting back a bit as we reach the halfway point, 125 laps.
You can watch Scott Goodyear in that rear camera shot, how he would come up, he felt the air out just for a little bit, and then he zoomed right on by Brayton. That kind of gives you an idea how the air affects things, Paul.
The high banks of Michigan International Speedway put nearly twice the stress load on the Indy cars than does the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Gary Gerald takes a look at the adjustments as the team are forced to make here at Michigan.
The biggest concern of every driver and every team here at Michigan is the fear of a mechanical failure because of the stress loads that these cars experience at speeds of 220 miles per hour on the 18-degree banking. Compounding that fear are the very tough Michigan winters that have left the racing surface very bumpy in several areas. Now, in addressing those concerns, as the crews prepare the car, they concentrate on several critical areas. One of them is the suspension. On every corner of the car, all of the suspension pieces are brand new. Wishbones, upper and lower. The push rods, the toe link pieces. Now, at the rear of the car, another critical area would relate to the half shaft and the CV joints. Here's a half shaft. On each end of the shaft is a CV joint. You can see how it flexes and moves as the car goes over the bumps. You find the CV joints in the half shaft located right here. Here's the shaft. Here are the joints. Each rear wheel works independently as it's connected to the actual drivetrain. Another area of concern down inside here, wheel bearings, where temperatures are closely monitored. And there are also fresh pieces that bolt the engine to the actual chassis as they make sure that it's plenty stout in the engine mount department. As the teams make these preparations, they've got to be absolutely certain that the car can absorb 500 miles of punishment. And consequently, they may have to play it a little bit conservative to protect these pieces at the start of the race. If they can do that, they know that they can be in the money or possibly victory lane.
One very rough track. One very disappointed Mario Andretti. An opportunity to score his first victory since Cleveland 4 years ago. And suddenly it's gone away. Of course, battling with the two young Canadians, Goodyear and Tracy, certainly had to take its toll on that car.
It's a devastating day for the Andretti team because Michael Andretti is now dropping perhaps decisively out of contention. Bobby Rahal for the championship. Rahal running third right now, picking up a lot of points. We're going to see him way ahead of Michael at the end of today.
You can feel the disappointment radiate from that great champion as he looks back into his car. And we look at the leader of the race, Scott Goodyear, with Paul Tracy just behind and Rahal now third. Yellow flag has just come out for a report of debris on the course. The leader is in. Jack Arute is there.
And it's a very calm pit stop on the part of Derek Walker and his crew for Scott Goodyear, and he is off and away very quickly, Paul.
So anticipating that yellow, they got out quickly. Paul Tracy came in as well, and in fact had the scored lead for a moment because he was further down the line over the start-finish line. Bobby Rahal, the third-place car, rolls away. Here's the fourth-place car of Rahal Boycel. Currently running in fifth place is Scott Pruitt, having a magnificent run. So under a yellow for debris, the front of the field all comes in and makes now their fourth stop of the day. There's Scott Pruitt, the fifth-place car, as he lines up under the yellow and turns down into the pits. So Scott Pruitt will make his stop as well. The True Sports team now waiting for him. That's Al Unser Jr. that slides by on the outside as he races for his pit as well. Little Al is running in sixth place. And in fact, as he passes Scott Pruitt on the pit lane, he moves up to fifth. So there will be a battle for fifth and sixth between these two cars as they roll out, seeing who can get out first. Al Unser Jr., they're still working on him. Now little Al pulls away, as does Scott Pruitt. And Scott Pruitt's got the speed. Can he beat him to the blend line? It's actually a battle for position. And no, Al Unser Jr. beats Scott Pruitt to the line, and in doing so, it's worth fifth position.
Yeah, you talk about hard racing. Little Al busted the tires loose just before he got to that blend line, Paul.
So now, still under the yellow, as we circle the track, the yellow is for debris on the course. Let's go down to Gary Gerald.
Carl Hogan, of course, the co-owner with Bobby Rahal of this fine car that's running in third place up to this series of stops. The question, Carl, with Michael Andretti having dropped out earlier, is that impacting your strategy regarding the season championship points as the points leader?
No, I think that actually we had our strategy set from the beginning of the car. When we started, we weren't sure of it. We were going to go very careful, make sure we got set up. The car seems to be getting better every time we come in. Bobby's in a lot of communication with us in the pits here. We're making constant changes. It seems like the car keeps getting better. With Michael out, of course, it takes a lot of pressure off of us, but actually what we're doing is still running the same race strategy as we started with.
Okay, we thank you. Good. Paul?
So the leaders once again making a stop and taking advantage of the caution to do so. Our overhead shots today, courtesy of the Goodyear blimp Stars and Stripes, sporting Goodyear's corporate blue and yellow colors. Piloting the blimp today, Jim Maloney from Vienna, Virginia. There it is, floating in a beautiful sky lazily over this track at Michigan International.
You know, the interesting thing is Bobby Rahal is the only former winner of a race. He's currently running in the top 4. This may very well be a day in which we see a new man win a race.
And the points, if the race would end right now, Sam Posey?
Well, you can see, obviously, Rahal would have a stranglehold on the situation, and second place would be shuffled. Michael Andretti dropping back into third, Al Unser Jr. moving up.
Well, there's no question about Michael's finishing position since he is out of the fight, as is his father, the pole sitter, Mario Andretti.
The race is not over, but we can look at like Bobby Rahal and see how smart he is, how smart his crew is, because he really ran slow or way back in the early part of the race, and now he's up in third place. Now remember, I think he's a very smart man. He's really going after the championship. He's already in third, only 2 spots off of first, way ahead in the points, as Sam said, if he finished now.
Well, when the race began, Michael Andretti jumped off and led solidly through the early part of the race until suddenly something let go in his car, taking Michael out. And taking over the lead then was Mario Andretti. And now we are in a situation where 2 yet to win in racing. Paul Tracy and Scott Goodyear are leading this race under yellow. Coming up on Monday, August 10th, the New Orleans Saints versus the Chicago Bears, an NFL preseason special here live at 8 o'clock Eastern on ABC Sports. So we continue under the yellow flag as Mario Andretti has made his way back toward the pit area and is receiving the thanks for a great race thus far from his many fans. Back at the Michigan 500, live here on ABC Sports, still under yellow. The third event of the 1992 Texaco-Haviland Pit Stop competition in Toronto proved to be a key positioning round before today's conclusion of the competition here during the Michigan 500. John Andretti and his team spent the least amount of total time on the pits lane in Toronto, followed by the Gallus-Craco team of Danny Sullivan and Al Unser Jr. You just saw Danny. Here is John Andretti. Their excellent pit work have moved these teams into second, third, and fourth, respectively, behind Bobby Rahal, who leads both the IndyCar point standing and the overall pit stop competition. There are the points, the money paid. So that will be resolved here at the conclusion of the running today. We're still under yellow, so let's go down to the pits.
Arie Luyendyk, the last Ford hope in this race, now on the sidelines, and I know it's a bitter disappointment, and I know you were chasing some severe handling problems all day.
Well, right from the start, the car was pushing, and it just wouldn't turn in, especially on full tanks. At the end of the run, the last 5-6 laps of a fuel tank, I could run I actually ran a 221, I think, but in the beginning it was like 206, 207, and the car was just a real handful, and I couldn't compete in the corners behind other cars. The car would just wash away.
Thank you, Arie.
All right,
Paul?
Too bad to see Arie out of the run. We're on board with Al Unser Jr., who has been rumored to be leaving Gallus-Craco Racing next season for Formula One. We ask him about loyalty and how it relates to his racing career.
It means an awful lot to me just to be able to race, and you know, I would be racing if they paid me prize money alone, you know, or just make me able to put my kids through school is all the money I need to go racing, and I don't do it for that. I do it because I love racing, and in order for me to put my heart into it, then I have to ask that back from my guys and from all the people that are involved with me, and if it slips, then my heart kind of goes away a little bit, and then it doesn't work.
But little Al does have a test session with Bennington coming up in September. Both Michael and little Al rumored to be going to Formula One next year, but as we've seen with Paul Tracy and Scott Goodyear here, we have new names. There's Scott Goodyear, the leader of the race, who can easily replace those stars should they leave.
Isn't it ironic that even in a year in which you win the Indianapolis 500, your fortunes can come unraveled? It happened for Arie Luyendyk, too, a couple of years ago.
So ready now to come back to green once again as we complete this yellow session. The pace car is off. Scott Goodyear, the leader of the race. Take a look at Rahal, battle for second place. Rahal moves high on the track, and Rahal is on the roll now as he gets alongside Paul Tracy and gets past, and Bobby Rahal moves into second.
Tracy got hung up just a little bit at the restart. He was too close to the car in front of him, couldn't get a run at it. Rahal got a little run at him. Now watch Tracy try to come back on him here, Paul.
Paul Tracy makes the charge, drag race down the backside, as here they come, and Paul Tracy moves back into second. So Rahal and Tracy have a great battle going, which should work to the advantage of Scott Goodyear.
You can just bet you that Rahal is still not moved by this. He doesn't care whether Tracy's ahead or not. He just wants to keep and try to win, keep the car together and try to win the 500-miler, because that's where the points are.
Maybe it's just the paint job of the car, but Paul Tracy's starting to remind me of a young Rick Mears. There's Al Unser Jr.
Just ahead of him is that battle for second place between Rahal and Paul Tracy. Take a look at this Chevrolet-provided telemetry. Boy, is it great. Look at the lateral G's. Sometimes in these corners, for a few seconds, you will see as much as 4 G's lateral. Telemetry may not show that because of the interval in the data stream. There is Bobby Rahal just to the outside. Little Al moved down right on top of Rahal for a moment. Great telemetry feed out of these cars. And there is Rahal. Little Al just behind him. Paul Tracy solidly back in second place once again, but solidly in first place is Scott Goodyear.
And of course, every one of these cars now contending the lead, running a Chevrolet engine. In the battle between Ford and Chevrolet that Bobby mentioned before the race, Chevrolet has staved off Ford in a very big way today.
These are, in fact, all the Chevrolet A engines, all built by Franz Weiss down in Texas, all by the same guy. Theoretically, they're all equal engines, and the best I can tell, they really are.
Al Unser Jr. is running in 5th place, 1 lap behind the lead. On the leader lap, Scott Goodyear, Paul Tracy, Bobby Rahal, and 4th place, Rahul Boisel. We continue to ride with Little Al. Watch the RPMs climb. Now into the first turn. Now, Bobby, we see 100% throttle, though we're seeing the speed and RPM change. Explain that.
Well, I don't think that the telemetry is working exactly right on the throttle, Paul. I think you'd find out. I was going to mention that sometimes it's a little bit wrong. In the turns, he backs off for sure, but in the turn just previous to that, it was off too long. Like the 27% right now is definitely wrong. He runs through that 3 and 4 turn at least 80% all the time.
6th place, Scott Pruitt moves inside John Andretti, and Scott Pruitt looking for a grab of 6th place. John Andretti had it. Scott Pruitt has just taken it away. Now a look out the front of Scott Pruitt's car. What a great view.
Yes, and just look at the high line that John Andretti had. He was right flat on the edge of the black. Everything outside of that is loose. Look at the black on the racetrack, the gray on the right. Everything in the gray is going to be very loose because that's all the marbles that the guys have thrown. That's where it is.
First time we've seen this new nose cam from Broadcast Sports Technology. Look down on the front there. Those 2 little like teeth-shaped things. Those are what they use to change the setting of the front wing during a pit stop.
Scott Pruitt's best finish this year has been 6th. He came within a whisker of getting the pole at Long Beach, but when you consider the combined talents of everyone on this team, you have to say the season thus far has been frustrating, and they certainly deserve better. And today, they are earning a better place on the track.
Go back and we'll take a look at that pass that we were talking about just a moment ago. There it is. There's Scott Pruitt, John Andretti running high. And look how he overhauls him, forcing Andretti way up to the wall.
And he really forced him out there, and John just stayed out there. John even got into the gray a little bit. The idea is you take your right rear, like Scott Pruitt did, and just gently move it to the right. The guy that's on the outside isn't going to hesitate just a little bit, and then it's easier to go on by.
Scott Pruitt running smoothly in 6th place after 150 laps. The scheduled distance, 250 laps or 500 miles. As we look at the full running order all the way through the field, only 13 cars still active on the track at the moment. There's a list of everyone out of the race thus far. Let's go to the pits and Jack.
Well, Paul, you know, normally Roger Penske only runs 2 cars through most of the IndyCar season. For the 500 miles, he runs 3 cars. Paul Tracy is still in competition. His team, mostly carrying the blue fire suits, they're part of the pickup crew for Paul Tracy's 3-car effort. But with Rick Mears dropping out of the race, some of the experts from Rick Mears' pit have been pressed into service. And probably one of the more important guys, Jerry Brion.
Jerry Brion is a tire expert on Rick Mears' team. You talk about a guy that knows compounds. There's Leslie Goodyear, and really knows how to make a tire stick. Jerry Brion is the man.
Yeah, he is also a very fine collector of model trains, HO scale, which, Paul, you and I have a passionate interest for, too.
Oh, you bet. He's
our guru, isn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, he's also the chief fabricator. He makes all the headers for the cars. One of the most important part of the cars, the turbocharger part, the header makes that work. Brion makes every one of them.
Watching Bobby Rahal, now 6 seconds behind the leader of the race in 3rd place. The leader remains to be Scott Goodyear. Paul Tracy is 2nd. We'll be back after this message and a word from our ABC stations. Back at Roger Penske's Michigan International Speedway, watching 4th place, Rahal Boisel in the number 11 car, the car normally assigned to Hiro Matsushita, who had that terrible accident at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in practice. And Boisel has been driving this car since then. Matsushita gave it a try at Toronto, but his leg's still far too painful with a broken femur to be able to run the car, especially on a rough circuit like here at Michigan. After 153 laps, here is the race summary. Scott Goodyear, the leader of the race, having at that time led 57 of the 153 laps, though the average speed is well below the track record here at 189.7 miles an hour. But let's not forget, 189.7 miles an hour is the fastest 500-mile race run ever.
It certainly is, and that was by Little Al, Paul, and that was a race where they didn't have very many yellows, and he laked that thing hard all day long. Fastest race we've ever seen for sure.
At the front of the field, it remains Scott Goodyear, Paul Tracy, and then 3rd place is Bobby Rahal. None of those cars in contest. As a matter of fact, at the moment, none of the cars in the field in contest.
Boisel was really happy. Not that Hiro got hurt, but he was able to get a ride from Matsushita. That's one of Dick Simon's cars, and the team is really ginning good, going fast this year.
In fact, Dick Simon had promised that after Indianapolis, Rahal was going to have a full-time ride to the end of the season. This just helped a little bit more.
Speaking of people who've been hurt, Nelson Piquet, about 2 weeks ago, made a trip to Tokyo. Remember, he was so badly hurt at Indianapolis. He took 2 first-class seats. There's Tony Bettenhausen leaving the pits. And was able to make a short business trip. It was great, he said, to get out and away from Indianapolis for a while where he'd been recuperating.
Tony Bettenhausen, who runs in 11th place, has been an off-and-on driver this year.
Well, along with Bobby Rahal, he is the only owner driver in racing today, but you sense that unlike Rahal, Tony is shifting to be more an owner than a driver, driving only the ovals and hiring Stefan Johansson for the road courses. Tony is 40, he has 2 daughters, is said to have very little interest in continuing to drive into his 50s as Mario and AJ have.
And Stefan Johansson, who has been driving this car from time to time, as you said, Sam, tested the car for True Sports last week at the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course. So there is a chance there perhaps for Johansson with 2 different rides.
Yeah, and Tony's a good owner. He's a good organizer. He's a good promoter. He's really good at that, and so he could get a lot of good drivers to drive that car.
And boy, he's got some of that Bettenhausen blood in him, doesn't he? I mean, a man that truly loves racing in all its facets.
It's interesting to watch the different grooves this guy takes. And we watch Tony going around. You watch, he's totally up high. Watch Scott Goodyear, he's down on the bottom. So there's different there. What's Goodyear like right there?
Like you said.
I didn't intend for that to happen, but nonetheless, I was pointing out the different grooves.
I'm afraid we also saw a speed differential.
You saw Scott Goodyear, whoa, as he really moved past there. And this is Scott Pruitt, a battle for 6th place. And behind him is John Andretti as he closes in, trying to catch Scott Pruitt. The only true battle on the course at the moment. Scott Goodyear running solidly in the lead. Emerson Fittipaldi now out of the race, and Gary Gerald is with him.
Indeed, Paul, it's been a struggle for Emerson Fittipaldi. It started with a bad CV joint, and it never got any better today, Emerson.
Well, the car was running really strong beginning of the race. I was diced with Scott Goodyear, and then when I came in, they found there was a CV joint leaking. already 3 laps down, and then I nearly lost into turn 3, and we had a rear damper off. And now the handle is very tricky. We don't know what's wrong in the car. We decide to stop.
Emerson, a lot of speculation about your future for next season. Any comment? Will you be racing with Roger Penske in '93?
Well, everything looking very good for next season.
Thank you, Emo. Paul?
Great way to not answer a question.
Yes.
Now, Paul Tracy is the whole hope for the Penske organization.
You know, Emerson's CV joint, that's really the U joint, the CV joint on the rear axle. And what happens when he says it leaks is it's got a rubber boot around it. The rubber gets torn and melted off, and the grease leaks out. That's very dangerous, Paul.
Let's keep an eye now on the third place car of Bobby Rahal. The officials, one of the track observers, reported they thought they saw a spray at the back of this car, which, by the way, is Lola chassis 007. So Rahal, who was given to name his cars, obviously this one is 007.
He's
and
running
he pulls
awful
down
low and slow.
Whatever it is, it probably has finally affected the car as Bobby Rahal is on the pit road out of third place. Gary Gerald awaits his arrival.
After a quick run from Emerson Fittipaldi, here's Rahal, and we'll wait. They keep the engine running. They look at the back of the car. There's an official there checking to see if there's any kind of spray or not. Crew is cleaning the radiators. Water bottle back out, off the jack. 12.6 seconds, and he's back on course.
So the IndyCar officials would have had a good look at that car while it was in the pits and be able to look at it for any moisture, which might indicate a spray problem. You saw a puff of smoke there as he went up a gear, but that's fairly normal to the cars.
Well, what would happen there is then their decision would be to come on in. They're just about ready for pit stop anyway. Come in, let the guys look at it so he doesn't get black flag, and then go back out. Hopefully it didn't have a leak, and that's what they wanted to show the officials.
Unfortunately, that's what it did in terms of his scoring position. Dropped him from third down to fourth and put him a lap behind the leaders. Let's go to Gary.
Well, here's the culprit from Bobby Rahal. This is what came out of one of the radiators. And when you seal off that important flow of air, temperatures go up. It was an overheating problem that was causing that touch of spray. Now they hope there's been no damage and the temperatures go back down.
Right there is why you see at so many racetracks a sign that says control your debris, because it can be about a $100,000 problem if that gets into your radiator. Al Unser Jr. now closing on the back of Bobby Rahal. Little Al runs in fifth place. This is a fight for fourth. Rahal is currently there, but Little Al can smell the possibility of a pass. There it is. Little Al down inside Rahal. Can he hold on to fourth place? He does.
Yes, and it's obvious Rahal had problems with his engine. You know, when they get too hot, you figure those things make well over 700 horsepower. They can't stand too hot for very long because the cylinders start detonating, exploding inside, and then the engine will break. So Rahal has definitely lost a little bit of engine right now.
And there is Rahal Boisel, who was his nemesis earlier, in third place as he comes around him. Of course, with Bobby Rahal being back a lap, that's not a contest for position. Boisel now runs in third. Again, the top of the order. Scott Goodyear leads it. Paul Tracy is in second. Royal Boisel sits in third place, and he is 8 seconds behind the leader of the race. So the front of the field still close together, but not in contest.
Rahal got a pit stop out of the way right there, so even though he slid back a little bit, Paul, it may not be too bad. The main problem is, again, if he has engine problems. Look at Little Al's right hand. You can see how much the steering feedback gets in the turns.
Look more importantly at his helmet to see how much bouncing he's doing in the cockpit. That shows you what the drivers have complained about here on how very rough this circuit is. So Al Unser Jr. running in fourth place as we look down on the giant crowd here at Michigan International. We'll be back. Back at the Michigan 500, under green, the leaders have begun to make pit stops. Here is Paul Tracy in the pits. Rahal Boisel has been in as well, as has Scott Goodyear. Look at Paul Tracy light the tires on number 7 as he roars out of the pits and back into the competition under the green flag. Here is Scott Goodyear, who is running behind the leader of the race. Can he beat Tracy to the end of the pits and pick up the top position? Scott Goodyear moves into second place, but Paul Tracy is already rolling back at speed, and Paul Tracy should assume the lead of this race.
Goodyear has made his stop. I think Paul Tracy is now the Don Garlits of pit stop exits. Boy, does he burn those tires up.
I think he could take a little bit easier on his clutch and transmission this late in the race, especially when he's leading it. But that's part of the learning he's going to have to go through.
Well, that does bring up a question. Emerson Fittipaldi went out of this fight with a problem with his CV joint, his constant velocity joint, a modern version of a universal. That's something that is really pressured when you roll out of the pits hard like that.
Paul, it just literally kills him. It's really hard on him. Of course, if you get the tires broke loose hard enough, it doesn't make a lot of difference. He did eventually do that.
Are there problems for Scott Goodyear? Perhaps Gary Gerald can tell us.
Paul, the first glitch in the armor of Scott Goodyear today on the pit stop while we were in the break. He overshot the mark by about 18 inches to 2 feet. They had to push him back because, remember, these fuel hoses are only about 9 to 10 feet long. Consequently, it was a 19.5-second stop. That's about 6 seconds longer than normal, and it translates to a lot of yards on the racetrack.
Well, it made the difference between first and second place because Scott Goodyear is in second now, 4.5 seconds back.
Gary, it's still incredible, isn't it, that they slow from 225 miles an hour to a specific exact point. To overshoot by just 18 inches seems an absurdly small margin of error.
We become so accustomed to seeing them hit those marks routinely that when they do have to lock it up and slide those few inches past, it's an agonizing moment for everybody in the pit.
But people still have to remember, 225, 230 mile an hour.
This was just a few laps ago while we were in break as Paul Tracy, his car working very well on a light fuel load, was able to maneuver up and get past Scott Goodyear and take the lead. Of course, they were using Scott Brayton's position to aid in that pass just a little bit. But it's obvious that on light fuel loads, Tracy is in very good shape. Scott Goodyear tried to come back hard. They both know that they were racing within a very few laps of a pit stop, but still neither one wanted to give up.
No, that's the time you'd really like to get a little advantage on the other guy so you can have that little buffer for the pit stops. For example, Scott Goodyear crew made a little mistake, or he made the mistake, and they suffered from it, so he's behind a little bit now.
So as a result of that pass and then the pit stops, Paul Tracy got into the lead. Scott Goodyear fell to second, Rahal Boycel third, Bobby Rahal fourth. And into the pits was Scott Goodyear.
Now you can see they just couldn't quite get that fuel hose in to Scott Goodyear. There's Bobby Rahal in.
We're back live. Bobby Rahal, fourth place, into the pits with a cooling off jack.
Well, Paul, you talked about, Gary Gerald did, about the debris that was in the radiator and the problem and the concern that it might cook the engine. That's exactly what has happened. It's all over for Bobby Rahal today, and that is not as costly as it could have been in the chase for the championship because his major competition has gone out already. Gets the well wishes of his wife, and it's over.
You know, Jack, the interesting thing is, although he was unable to extend his lead in terms of points, there are now fewer races left in the season. Just 6 left now between here and the season closer in Monterey. So, in fact, tactically, he's improved his position even without scoring points.
You can bet. Michael Andretti was one happy little boy, or one happy person right now when he saw Rahal drop out like that.
Well, Bobby Rahal does have a consolation in climbing out of the car as we continue to watch the circulating Paul Tracy in the lead of the race. Bobby Rahal has won the Texaco Haviland pit stop contest far and away. Great set of stops throughout the year, and so for his team, Bobby Rahal is to be congratulated. The summary for Paul Tracy: started 6th, now up to 1st, has led 19 of the 183 laps complete. And Paul Tracy is running down low on the course and slowing as Scott Goodyear comes past. Paul Tracy is on the pit road. Paul Tracy heads for the pits as Scott Goodyear reassumes the lead.
You know, that's Danny Sullivan, Paul. What happens is both cars are blue and white. All of us thought it was Paul Tracy, but it's really Danny Sullivan coming in for a normal pit stop.
Well, could have fooled me. Scared the daylights out of me. Danny Sullivan in the pits. Paul Tracy still out in front. Well, Danny Sullivan, well off the pace of the race, running in 10th place, makes a routine stop.
You know, the interesting thing about Sullivan is he has won 4 of the 24 500-mile races that he has entered. He has the best batting average in all of racing for 500-mile races. He's not going to add one today, I don't think.
You know, Sam, it's interesting how those two blue and white cars on the racetrack look identically the same. You can't see the difference until we see the onboard cameras to see them up close. There's Paul Tracy, still on the track and going fast.
Now consider this possibility with 186 of the 250 laps now complete. Paul Tracy leads it. Scott Goodyear is second. Rahal Boisel is third. None of those names have ever appeared in the top position at the conclusion of an IndyCar race, let alone a 500-miler.
And look at those, 2 Canadians and 1 guy from Brazil.
You figure what is on Paul Tracy's 23-year-old shoulders right this minute. He is running at the Boss's racetrack. He's running exactly a year after his first race for Roger Penske, which he crashed last year here. And suddenly he is leading the race. Neither of his teammates, Mears or Fittipaldi, is in contention. They're both out. It's all resting on him, and he may very well get the job done.
You know, and Sam, above that, he's really looked like a pro all day. He's looked like he's done a lot of 500-milers because we've been watching how he works the traffic, how he works the crew, how he's just generally been thinking on the track. And it's like a veteran.
You see the interval first to second place, about 4.5 seconds, but a tremendous distance here. Now, Sam, if you want to prophesize a little, Rick Mears scored his first 500-mile race win driving for Roger Penske in his third 500-mile run. That was the 79 Indy 500.
I see where you're going.
Paul Tracy is driving for Roger Penske in his third 500-mile run.
I got no problem thinking that Paul Tracy right here is not only a driver of the future, he's a driver of the here and now. I think we're looking at one of the best drivers in IndyCar racing.
Bobby Rahal out now is with Jack Arute.
Well, Paul, he's walking away from us here. We'll try giving the congratulations to his crew because they really did do a fine job, Bobby. What put you out?
Well, there's so much garbage flying around the racetrack, and I guess we sucked a bag into the radiator, and it just blew out all the water, and it's really a damn shame. It's because the car was running very, very well, and you know, we had guessed a little bit on the setup, and the car really started to respond as the day went on, and you know, it's just ridiculous the amount of paper and garbage on the track.
Well, one of the things you might want to share with your crew is they have just determined that your team has won the season-long Haviland Pit Crew Championship. Congratulations.
They've done a super job, and this is our first DNF, and you can't even call this their fault or anybody's fault. It's just there's so much paper, but I'm real proud of them. They've done a super job all year.
Paul?
So in the points fight, Rahal out of the race, Michael Andretti out of the race. Al Unser Jr., who was second in the points, currently is running in 4th place, but Paul Tracy is leading. We'll be back. Back at the Michigan 500 before a giant crowd, 196 laps now complete. Consider these names: Rick Mears, Emerson Fittipaldi, Mario and Michael Andretti, Bobby Rahal, all out of the run. And so there you see who we have left. Names like Paul Tracy, Scott Goodyear, Rahal Boisel, 3 names who have never won an IndyCar race, running in the top 3 positions, followed by Al Unser Jr. and Scott Pruitt. In 6th place is John Andretti. Scott Brayton is 7th. In 8th place is Buddy Lazier. As we take a look from the nose of 5th place Scott Pruitt's car as he moves inside of Tony Bettenhausen.
You know, you mentioned Buddy Lazier, Paul. There's a Buick engine, one of the Indianapolis Buicks that normally don't run the kart circuit, running with 5 less inches of manifold pressure.
There's his car there.
Going good today.
Buddy Lazier, new team arrangement now that Leader Card Racing is out. Here is Hemmelgarn Racing, new sponsor, Viper Security Systems, and they expect to put a lot of money into this racing effort. So here may be a growing team of the future with Buddy Lazier and Ron Hemmelgarn. Let's go to the pits and Jack.
Well, another budding team that we may see some major changes is right here in the Penske team. You can see Rick Mears right behind me already told us that he got out of the ride today because his wrist hurt. Now, he is going to meet with Dr. Terry Trammell on Tuesday. And listen to this. A decision will be made Tuesday as to whether or not Rick Mears will continue to drive for the rest of the year. There is a strong possibility that if Rick has to put his hand in a cast, Roger Penske may, and I repeat may, elect on Tuesday to name Paul Tracy as the regular driver for Rick Mears' car for the rest of the year.
Well, I certainly speculated earlier that a cast would go on this week and keep Rick out until the race on the oval at Nazareth, but I certainly didn't expect to the end of the year.
It sure makes you wonder what the composition of the Penske team might be next year, because with only 2 seats available throughout the season, you kind of think you want Paul Tracy in one of them.
Well, you know, another thing about Rick Mears, he's way too good a driver, especially on the ovals, for Penske not to take care of him. And Roger's going to take care of Rick. He has to do it.
Rick Mears, his hopes for multiple 500 wins with now 100 miles, 50 laps to go for Paul Tracy. And not just for Paul, for the top 3, none of whom have won an IndyCar race yet. Paul Tracy, Scott Goodyear, Rahal Boisel, certainly in hopes of staying at the front to the end of this run.
Racing has been Paul Tracy's entire life. He began when he was 8 years old. He's been helped along through the years by his father, of course, more recently by Roger Penske. But this is this man's life, and right now we're looking at the high point of that life.
Paul Tracy, a former Indy Lights champion, looking so solid in this Penske car. Took the job, took a chance as a test driver with Roger Penske. Not a whole lot of hope that he would be driving a lot of races, but now it's certainly paying off for him.
This would be the Penske team's first win, of course, since the very first race of this season, which Emerson Fittipaldi won. They've hit an embarrassingly long dry spell for this great team, and what a place to get back on top, the track that Roger Penske owns.
Yeah, he wrecked one of Roger Penske's cars leaving the pits at Indianapolis, if some people might remember, in practice. And rumors started flying around that Penske might just let him go because he was wrecking too many cars. When in fact, Roger probably has more faith and stays behind, more stamina behind his drivers than anybody else. Instead, he's given Paul newer cars, better cars, and a new engine, the whole shoot caboodle.
So there we have out in front. It is Paul Tracy. You're on board now with Scott Pruitt in his aerodynamic vehicle. But recently he had an opportunity to ride in a very, very fast hydrodynamic vehicle, the nuclear submarine USS Birmingham.
Open the outboard induction valve, place a low pressure blow on all main ballast tanks.
Go past the 25. Bad battle station.
Shoot.
That's pretty impressive.
That's it, it's gone.
What was that?
See you later.
Scott is comfortable in the Navy's high-tech environment. Running 400 feet beneath the Pacific Ocean, Scott took the wheel.
I can find out to 400 feet. I full dive, barrel waters, 20-degree down bubble.
Look, this baby gets going down, doesn't it?
I'll go past the 25. 15.
Just keep pushing down.
Full dive. It's full dive. Okay. Ease them back off.
So this here is measuring the exact angle that...
There was no cubicle he didn't probe, no crewman he didn't meet, and no sight he didn't see. A busman's holiday for the likable veteran of the IndyCar wars. Pruitt has a strong feeling for the Navy. He visited a Navy base in Sicily and an aircraft carrier in action during the Gulf War.
Hey, if I could have everybody's attention, please. Having completed the arduous evolutions that we scheduled today, launching torpedoes, doing steep angles, and steering the ship, and culminating with the successful emergency blow, I'd like to present Scott Pruitt with his USS Birmingham honorary nuclear submariner car. Congratulations, sir. You're now a submariner.
Scott's day at Pearl Harbor is one he'll not soon forget. But then again, neither will the crew of the USS Birmingham.
Thanks.
Scott Pruitt still runs in 5th place behind the lead of the race, but he is closing on Al Unser Jr. just ahead. So a battle very shortly developing for 4th place as Scott Pruitt in that True Sports car looking very solid here today, pursuing the Galmer of Al Unser Jr. There is Rahal Boisel sitting just ahead of him. So Scott Pruitt is on a charge now. Boisel is a lap ahead. And when he gets around him, even though Boisel is in 3rd, it is not a battle for position. He must first get around Al Unser Jr. and then come the full 2 miles and catch up.
The idea, Paul, would be to get ahead and then have a yellow. Nobody wants a yellow, we know, but if you get a yellow, then he comes back around on the same lap, then he really becomes competitive.
So many people thought that if Scott Pruitt had a success this year, it would come on a road course. It's kind of surprising to see it come here on the oval, and very encouraging because this team has battled with problems on high-speed tracks. Today, they're doing very well.
In 6th place behind Scott Pruitt is John Andretti, then Scott Brayton, then Buddy Lazier, then Danny Sullivan, then Tony Bentonhausen. We take a look at Al Unser Jr. and the race summary after 203 laps as we move to the closing laps of this race. Paul Tracy looking so very strong. Average speed coming up.
Look at the strap on the right, our right-hand side, the left side of little Al's helmet. You can see how the drivers keep their heads up by pulling 2.5 G's in the corners. Without that strap, there isn't a driver here that can hold his head up.
189.7 miles an hour, the race record. And of course, they're now just about 2 miles an hour in average speed a race from that. Look at him reach up and just readjust his visor.
No, he's not adjusting the visor, Paul. He's pulling the helmet back down his head. What happened is the wind that's going over there. It isn't all the rough track making it shake. It's the wind making his helmet shake, and it lifts it up. Just imagine an airplane wing. That's what the helmet is. It's trying to go in the air.
Or great Chevrolet telemetry, which gives us a great reference for how much over the 500 miles on this very long afternoon, Al Unser Jr. and the rest of the drivers have been bounced around. Boy, look at him go up and down in that seat.
It is a violent ride out there. There's no question about it. As you see Scott Pruitt sweep by. To finish this race is kind of something mixed emotion because you get beaten up so bad.
211 laps complete. We move to the closing laps of this race. But Gary Gerald, I would suspect we're going to see some additional pit stops by everybody.
Paul, that's what's interesting right now. They're doing the math in the Derek Walker Scott Goodyear pit. There are now 39 laps to go. The normal pit window is around 35 laps. It's now been 35 laps since their last stop. We expect Goodyear at any moment, and they hope is the key word, that's the last time they'll have to come in. Now let's check on the Tracy situation with Jack.
Well, Gary, Paul Tracy has been called in just as you switched it down to me. Tim Bumps and the rest of the crew, including folks, as we said, from Rick Mears' crew, awaiting what they have determined will be their final stop of the afternoon. Now, he has not complained at all afternoon about the handling of the car, and they continue to talk him through. Roger Penske working on the radio with him, waiting for him to make his presence known. They have talked him through about how important it will be to leave the pits properly. He's been lighting the tires up, and they are going to try and get it as he brings his presence down here to the pit board. Let's see if they will make any changes. He locks the tires up, and he goes to work.
So Paul Tracy in the pits. Scott Goodyear comes in as well. Both cars in. Now it is a battle of the crews. Paul Tracy has been getting out the fastest recently. Scott Goodyear, there is Paul Tracy already away. Scott Goodyear still waiting for his rollout. Paul Tracy heads out. Raul Boisel comes in the pits at the same time. A long stop for Scott Goodyear. Finally, with the fuel fully in, he heads away. About 18 seconds for Scott Goodyear, the same length of time on the stop for Paul Tracy. That owing mostly to the slow fuel flow as they get the final gallons in.
It's always slower then, but if you notice on Scott Goodyear, he locked up the front brakes just as he got there. This is something he'll learn after he's run this 500-mile race, and he's got too much brakes on the front, and that's what caused him to overrun the pit on the pit stop before. Cost him about 5 seconds, Paul.
This time, though, he did nail it, Bobby. Here's Scott Pruitt into the pits, and of course, if you do lock up that front wheel on a stop where you know you're going to change the front tires, it's not so bad.
Report now coming from the IndyCar officials that Scott Goodyear's jack, as we watch Scott Pruitt making his stop, the jack that comes out of the bottom of the car, which just is a round cylinder about 1.5 inches in diameter, as Scott Pruitt spins the tires coming back, got stuck, causing a depression in the hot asphalt here, and they couldn't get the jack back up for a moment. Let's go to Gary.
Well, on the Goodyear stop, on the left rear tire, they're concealing a significant wear point. There was a strip about 4 to 6 inches long where the rubber had torn away. We don't know if the tire was cut. We don't know if it's a blistering problem or what, but that could have affected the handling on Goodyear's car. Now he's got fresh rubber. Can he catch Tracy?
And, of course, what you're watching is a tire engineer from Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company taking the temperatures in 3 to 4 places across the surface of the tire, and what that tells them, Bobby Unser, is how the suspension is handling, doesn't it?
It certainly does, Paul, and not only only is Goodyear's information that they need, but also to help the guys see how their car went during the race.
All right, let's go back and take a look at Scott Goodyear's last stop, because he runs now in second place behind Paul Tracy, and that last stop made a difference because apparently a jack got caught. Now, watch the car. The jack's underneath the car. He rolls in, locks the brakes just a little bit. The jacks engage.
See, the jacks are in the car.
Down underneath the chassis. They thrust out from the car. There are 4 of them, 2 in front, 2 in the rear. You can just get a glimpse of one behind the right front wing there. And well, it came down very slow, and it came down slow because one of them was stuck. In fact, the right front looks like it's still out a little bit.
Well, what happened? He really didn't stick it into the pavement, Paul. It was bent just a little bit and wouldn't retract. The rear dropped down first, and then the front came down too slow. But, you know, if he did have to stop some more, he'd probably really have a problem.
Again, the IndyCar officials keeping an eye on this car. 4th place, Al Unser Jr. They reported some smoke at the back of the car.
Well, Paul, you said before the race, this is a race of attrition, and that is exactly what's happening now. We're very near the end of the race, within 50 miles of the end of the race, and cars are beginning to really show the strain of racing at this place. It happens every year. It's happening again now.
Often the smoke that they see comes right after pit stops, and it really isn't smoke. What it is the cars are rubbing bottom, and they let out a little smoky puff underneath from the car rubbing. Just imagine a car rubbing at 230 miles an hour.
Well, and they're rubbing because they've just taken on a full 40 gallons of fuel. That's about 280 pounds, so it's sitting down harder on the springs.
And they start the cars right almost on the ground. If you look at these pictures, the cars go by, you'll see they're so close to the ground. Look at little Al's car there, almost touching right now. So when it gets down the turns, it rubs.
So no sign of additional smoke or vapor at the back of the car. This is Scott Goodyear when he came out at the last stop. Watch the front right area, we're told. Front right wheel of this car as he's rolling back to speed. You see that coming out from underneath, Bobby? It just kind of poked out a second and went back.
Yes, and probably what that really looks like, it looks like the jack. You see what happens when the car went down from the pit stop, Paul? The rear end went down first. He put it...
retracted itself, so it bent it, and I'm sure that that is the tube from the jack that raises the car in the air. So as I told you, he probably couldn't have made the next pit stop if there were to be one.
Well, let's hope that that didn't have any sharp edges as Scott Brayton gets into the wall. Scott Brayton grabs the wall. Up off of turn 3, rolls to a stop. The yellow flag is out at 220 of the 250 laps.
He was running 7th. He's done some serious damage to that car, and I think it's the first crash he has had this year and in a long time. Brayton may not have been the fastest driver on the track the last few years, but he's been very reliable.
He's okay. We constantly refer to Dr. Terry Trammell, that orthopedic surgeon out of Indianapolis, is so good with these guys. That is Terry Trammell talking to Scott Goodyear right there. So he's not just good in the operating room, he is right out on the track constantly with these guys.
To Scott Brayton. He seems to be fine.
He's the guy that Trammell that reconstructs all these feet that you hear about getting broken in Indianapolis, but he loves racing, and that's the reason he's here.
Well, let's hope that we don't see too much of that anymore. They're working on new rules. In fact, Mike Devin of the United States Auto Club Tech Committee was here yesterday, and they were talking about new rules. There's the accident right after he got into the wall. At least he got the back end of wall around and slapped the wall with the left side of the car.
Yes, and if you look at the right rear tire, it's flat, Paul, and it's not bent up or anything. Look at the hole in the right rear tire. So what probably happened is he ran over some debris on the track, blew the right rear tire, and then got into the fence, obviously causing a lot of damage to the car.
A lot of damage, a lot of oil on the track as a result of the coolers being collapsed. Now here's the onboard view of this situation. You ride now with Scott Brayton just seconds before his moment.
We'll know what happened.
Now you can almost hear that right rear tire blow as he went in there. He ran over something and just exploded the tire by running over something.
So the first really serious contact with the wall in this 500 miles, but Scott Brayton is okay standing out of his car. We have 222 laps left. We'll be back after this message and a word from our ABC stations.
Big coverage on Channel 2 Action News.
Back at the Michigan 500, the 5th caution period of the day. This time, perhaps the most serious, as Scott Brayton catches the wall coming off of turn 3 after he has a problem with the tires. Looks like he hit some debris on the track. They're now trying to get the car on the hook. Scott Brayton from nearby Coldwater, Michigan is okay. Now, Bobby, this was him right after he lost it and into the wall.
Yes, and he did it right. Look at the straightaway back there, Paul. He's come a long ways. You can see the smoke way back down the road. He did it still going straight. Just as you start rolling in the turn, the right rear tire blew from running over something, and he has no control over the car whatsoever, and it's the worst place in the world to bust loose and hit the wall.
Helpless passenger at that point in the game.
Fortunately, it happened diagonally across the track from where his thousands of fans are sitting in turn 1 and 2. I'm glad it didn't happen right in front of him.
So Paul Tracy and Scott Goodyear first and second. An update on Paul Tracy. Here's Jack.
Well, Paul, it really boils down to when we go back to green flag racing, it will be a sprint to the finish. Roger Penske, fully aware of this, has been talking to Paul Tracy, trying to remind him of what he should be concerned about when they get ready to drop the green flag. He went over several times on the radio. Remember, the green can come out in turn 3. Be ready there, because when you get to the stripe, you'd better be full on. And all that Paul Tracy said was 10-4. Let's check in with Gary Gerald.
Two things of interest in the Goodyear pit. Derek Walker behind us has sent a crew member down to the Dick Simon pit now to see if Rahal Boycell, who is down a lap, will let Goodyear move past him so that he can be directly behind Tracy and try to more directly challenge for the lead. We asked Derek, I said, is this Indianapolis all over again? He said, well, only that this time we're going to win. Paul?
Well, with 25 laps to go to the finish for Paul Tracy and Scott Goodyear, it is something they both understand. A sprint to the finish of the race. Let's go back to Jack.
Well, Paul, let me update you as to what the answer was from the Rahal Boycell team. They said, no way, no deal. We're going to try and unlap ourselves. We think there's still time for us to get in the hunt. How's that for a can of beans?
Adds to the sprint. It certainly does that. So Tracy, then Goodyear, then Boycell, then Alonso Jr., then this car, Scott Pruitt. So as they circle under the caution flag, with only one real accident here today, let's go back and think about accidents in the past here. Michigan Superspeedway has seen its share of incidents. It's no exception today, but really only one, when before it has been quite busy. In the first race in 1981, during a pit stop to refuel Herm Johnson, the car, then the pits were engulfed in flames. The fire spread to include Bobby Unser's pit before it was finally brought under control. Bravery was commonplace on that day. The following year on a restart, Hector Rabacchi and A.J. Foyt tangled, sending both cars into the wall and taking several others out of the race. In 1983, Kevin Cogan tangled with Gordon Johncock. The front of Gordy's car was crushed, and he suffered leg and foot injuries. On the final lap of that same race, John Paul Jr. challenged, then passed Rick Mears for the lead. But as he did, turbulent air from Paul's car sent Rick sliding. He slammed the wall. Then Rick was lanced by Chris Neifel. As the yellow came out, so did the checkered flag, signaling John Paul Jr.'s first and only IndyCar win. In 1984, Al Unser Jr. was moving to pass Chip Ganassi when Chip collected Al and took both to the guardrail. The cars disintegrated, but neither driver was seriously injured. Later in the same race, Pancho Carter was maneuvering on the backstretch, closing and attempting to pass Rick Mears. But then he lost control. As he ricocheted off the guardrail, he sheared off the thick supporting posts. The car protected its passenger through all of that and a frightening series of flips and rolls. With only a little help, Pancho Carter limped away from this accident. One of the most unusual incidents occurred here in 1984 when Gary Bentonhausen did pirouettes on the top of Howdy Holmes' car. Neither driver was injured. It was this accident that caused Mario Andretti to miss a race for the very first time in his career as he suffered broken ribs and a shoulder blade. Danny Ongayas barrel rolled down the backstretch, destroying his car. but Angayas walked away. Some of what we have seen in the past here, a much safer day. Look at the hole there in the right rear of Scott Brayton's car. He's okay. He's been checked over at the hospital, and they report he's in good shape. So now what we have is a sprint to the finish between Tracy and Goodyear. Still cleaning the track up after Scott Brayton's accident gives us a chance to look at something they're experimenting with. You might not think that auto racing and basketball have anything in common. Our Jackaroo shows us they do now, thanks to a recent development.
At one time or another, most of us have seen the famous pump shoe that's utilized in a lot of athletic endeavors. Well, the concept is a simple one. You add an air-filled bladder to each of the shoes to provide additional support to the foot area. Now, this concept has now been transferred over in a joint research project with the folks at Bell Helmet into helmet technology. What they've done is they've introduced the same type of air-filled bladder to the bottom area of a helmet. Once a driver puts this helmet on, he simply pumps it up for a snugger fit. Now, that's pretty important when you use a helmet in an open cockpit racing environment. Now, this is all very new. In fact, it's still being developed. And Al Unser Jr. is the driver who is working in the development process.
Al, you saw it too earlier with his helmet being pushed back by the airstream. That may help immensely. So they continue to move under the caution here. Paul Tracy is the leader. Scott Goodyear right behind in second place. Rahal Boycell a lap back in third. None of those men have ever won an IndyCar race. Then Al Unser Jr. and then John Andretti as we are waiting for the green flag to come out. We anticipate one more lap of caution. That's Tara. It's Paul Tracy's girlfriend. Yes. Boy, look at the smile. Smile and yet apprehension. She knows what is to come. So does Leslie Goodyear. A tremendous sprint to the finish of this race. Jackaroo?
The captain, Roger Penske, the last words he gave to Paul Tracy, he said they're going to 1 to go. Remember, Paul, you control this race. You control the start. Make them start it the way you want it. Again, all Tracy said was 10-4.
Well, Rick Mears had said time and time again that momentum is the key thing coming back from a yellow flag to a green. And in the front of the order, you have a much better chance to set that momentum coming back.
What Roger's really telling him, and Roger can't say everything because people can listen to his radios, but he's telling him when he goes into turn 3, open that dude up and get it moving, get a run at him, because there's nothing illegal about that.
We're going to see a comparison here, too, between two versions of the Chevrolet engine. The A engine in Scott Goodyear's car, the newer B engine in Paul Tracy's car.
A tiny field still circulating. Johnny Rutherford in the PPG pace car. Roger Penske wondering if his newest driver can earn a 500-mile victory, which would be Penske's 20th. You see there, that's Rahal Boycell. They could not strike a deal. He is going to start right behind Paul Tracy, even though he is a lap down. And Scott Goodyear will be back behind Boycell.
Yes, and keep in mind, little Al is back there, and he would like to get to Boycell also. So that's the reason Boycell's team is not trying to make a deal there.
So now a key moment as the pace begins to pick up as they head into 3. Johnny Rutherford already has the pace car well ahead. Paul Tracy picks up the pace looking for a green flag. He is going through turn 4 now. 230 laps are complete. 20 laps to go as we come back to the green flag from Nick Finoro. And Boycell closes up on Paul Tracy. Scott Goodyear still has to make his move. He got caught on slower momentum. Al Unser Jr. moves to the outside trying to get around Scott Goodyear.
There's a deal where experience really counts. Look how much Goodyear lost on that. Now, he should have known what Tracy was going to do. Stand on in turn 3 and take off. But he lost on that deal.
It was a demonstration that Emerson Fittipaldi taught everyone when he won his first IndyCar race here. Everyone thought, well, Formula One experience, he's not going to know how to come back from a yellow flag. But at the end of the race, he really knew how. Came back, took the lead, took the win. Goodyear is now closing on Rahal Boycell. Goodyear tries to find a position high. Boycell is also closing on Paul Tracy. Now, Paul Tracy has a challenge from Scott Goodyear. Tracy down low. Scott Goodyear runs high. Boycell no longer a factor, runs alone in third place, and Scott Goodyear takes the lead.
And he did it on the outside. He did it the hard way.
And now it's Tracy coming back again. He moves to the inside. Goodyear maintains that high groove. It works for Goodyear.
Boy, you can tell how important it is for these two Canadians to go against each other.
232 laps are now complete. Scott Goodyear is out in front and beginning to pull away.
And remember, we saw how full load of fuel works for Scott Goodyear. He's demonstrating that right now. Tracy doesn't work as well on a full load of fuel.
The lead changed hands 4 times in a single lap and put Scott Goodyear in front. Now Paul Tracy in the 7 Mobile car is trying to catch up as best he can. But Scott Goodyear drove around Paul Tracy despite the fact that Tracy got the best restart.
You just don't see guys that are just so new, that have never won a 500-miler, pass each other on the outside like Goodyear did to Paul Tracy.
But when you say new, we're talking new to IndyCar racing, which means that you have been several times a champion in another form of the sport before you come to IndyCars. And now Scott Goodyear, number 15, runs in front, possibly looking at a win. Here is the pass once again. Boissel down low. Goodyear up on the high side. And Scott Goodyear just working that high groove, and it worked to perfection.
2 cars in 1 turn, Paul. Both of them on the outside. It just isn't done very often.
A magnificently prepared machine, prepared by Walker Motorsports, and it's looking solid now. I would have thought at this point that Paul Tracy would be tighter in contention, but he's 2 seconds back from Scott Goodyear.
Well, I really believe if they had low fuel, if their fuel was almost out, Tracy would have been a heck of a lot more competitive.
Looking back now to the fight between Little Al and Rahal Boissel. Boissel in 3rd place, Little Al in 4th. It is a battle for position as well. And Boissel, you can see moving in the high groove, is around Paul Tracy, and it looks like Al Unser Jr. is going to get around him as well. I wonder if there's something wrong on Tracy's car.
There's obviously something wrong. Paul Tracy hasn't run this slow all day, and not saying that Little Al is running slow because he's running fast now, but he's always been faster.
What could it be coming back from a yellow that might slow Paul Tracy down?
Well, it could be that he's just maybe hurt the engine a little bit on the shifting, Paul. Who knows on that?
Paul Tracy continues his battle with 4th place Al Unser Jr. Even though Paul currently runs in 2nd place, Jr. a lap behind. Scott Goodyear has now pulled out nearly 3 seconds ahead of Paul Tracy. 237 laps are complete.
During the yellow flags, they sometimes adjust the engines to a leaner setting to save fuel. If you don't turn it back up in time for the restart, you can have problems. I doubt that's it, but it is perplexing because he seems to be down on power rather than handling.
When he was in the lead, he was running laps at a terrific rate. Now Paul Tracy appears to have slowed just a bit, and Scott Goodyear is looking strong. What about Paul Tracy, Jackaroo?
Well, Paul, they're all mum in Roger Penske's pick, but he has radioed to Paul Tracy, drop it into 6th gear. That, to me, would be an indication that their telemetry is telling them some problems with the engine.
Yes, that's their cruise gear. Obviously, he was going for the racing gear, Jack, and he's dropped it in the cruise gear now because they saw that it's a lost cause at the moment, at least.
Talk about a changing of the guard. New faces coming to the front in IndyCar racing. Paul Tracy, Scott Goodyear giving us a terrific race.
The interval from the Stars and Stripes overhead, the Goodyear blimp, as we look down on the track, and you see the interval. 1st to 2nd with Scott Goodyear out in front of this run and pulling away now 4.2 seconds ahead of 2nd place Paul Tracy. Will he get a payback now for the Indy 500?
You know, I think it's just fabulous for Scott Goodyear to have done what he did in Indianapolis, a 2nd place, so close to winning it, next to Little Al, and then to come back at the Michigan 500 and show that it wasn't a fluke.
Stars and Stripes floating overhead as we go to the final 10 laps of the run. And for the moment, it looks like Scott Goodyear has been able to resolve any differences that he may have had with Paul Tracy and continues to pull away at what for Tracy must be an alarming rate.
Now, I'm sure that he would be running his cruise gear right now, or at least Derek Walker would be telling him to do that because he's got a fairly good lead right now, Paul.
So what about Derek Walker? Gary Gerald?
Well, we're about to find out. Unlike Indianapolis, when you chase, now they're chasing you. What's the feeling, Derek?
Well, it's a good feeling. Hopefully in the next 10 laps we can hang on to that and pull it home.
What are the anxieties? What are the concerns in these final 10 laps?
Well, this is a tough track and it's, reliability. So we're just hoping everything stays together. So far, Mackenzie car's running fine, but, we got 9 laps yet.
All right, we'll watch with you.
Thank you.
Paul.
Derek Walker, Walker Motorsports. This would also be the first victory for that relatively new team as well, Bobby.
Well, remember now, imagine the feeling. He used to run for many years Penske Racing in its entirety. So for him to outrun Roger Penske today with a driver from Canada, a relatively new driver, it's going to be a feather in his hat.
And to outrun him, Penske, on Penske's home track. Boy, this is going to be a sweet victory for Derek Walker if Scott Goodyear, who we see here, can hang on.
Solid Point is the number 15 car. The silver and blue of Scott Goodyear continues to circulate now with just 8 laps to go and still setting a spectacular pace.
As we see Leslie's hands there, Scott Goodyear, her husband, has one of the firmest handshakes in racing. You look right at him, he shakes your hand, you know you're making contact.
You know, I don't know where Jim O'Donnell from McKinsey is today. He's watching it somewhere on TV, but I'll guarantee you, he and all the McKinsey people are turning flip-flops right now.
Well, they're a wonderful couple, Leslie and Scott Goodyear. Are they looking at their first IndyCar win? It is very possible now with just 7 laps to go. And Scott Goodyear pulling out 5.5 seconds over Paul Tracy.
And I think it speaks to the issue of how healthy IndyCar racing really is, because they talk about the enormous budgets of teams like Penske, but here is a team that has not one of those huge budgets. They focus all their money on one car. They had 2 here, but that's unusual for them. And yet they can still come to the front. They were second at Indy, of course. They may win this one. I think that's good.
Past Tony Bettenhausen flies the leader. You can see no one in contest at a moment. There's Al Unser Jr., 4th place. Scott Pruitt not challenging. Rahal Boycell sitting in front of him. Paul Tracy in 2nd. And this car, Scott Goodyear at the wheel, is on the fly. A tremendous run. They've really outweighted everyone here. Pulled the same strategy that served so well for little Al at the Indianapolis 500. Got him into 2nd place there, but got him into the lead here.
And they've had what you need to win a 500-mile race, which is a little luck. If that jack had not broken off just the way it did, Bobby, we were talking about it, could so easily have gone under a tire and given him a puncture. This race would have a very different complexion.
When it's your day, Sam, it's your day. But I watch as Scott goes around the track now. There's Boycell. But I watch as Scott goes around the track. He's got the utmost confidence. You can just watch the groove that he takes. There he is right there. He just cuts everything exactly the way he wants it, and he's not being conservative right now.
Paul Tracy now falls to 5.7 seconds behind the leader of the race. Scott Goodyear is running away with the Michigan 500 now with just 4 laps to go. Rahal Boycell still runs in 3rd. What a great run for this young man, driving for Dick Simon, making that car look spectacular. Back to the lead of the race, the 15 McKinsey car.
Remember that Boycell has had a record this year of getting very close to the end of the race, I think of Milwaukee and also of New Hampshire, and then having an engine blow. So if he can hang on to this one, he is going to be one happy man from South America.
Average speed of the race, 177.2 miles an hour. Very, very fast, but not nearly the record of this track. But of course, this track holds the record for the fastest 500-mile race ever. Scott Goodyear from Canada continues his run and looks so very good.
And he's being so smart right now. You watch Boycell's right behind him there, fairly close to him. He knows that Boycell is down a lap. He's just slowing down and taking care of his car, and that's really smart. Makes Derek Walker think, hey, I made a real good decision on this driver.
248 laps complete for Scott Goodyear. Leslie continues to watch on. The white flag should come out, indicating 2 miles to go the next time by. Scott Goodyear with a 5.7-second lead works the backstretch. They almost have this race in hand. Scott Goodyear working into turn number 3. Nick Finoro already raising up the white flag and showing it to Scott Goodyear. The last time that a Canadian won in the IndyCars was Jacques Villeneuve at Elkhart Lake in August of 1985. Villeneuve still races Formula One snowmobiles. We haven't seen him in an IndyCar for a while, but here is another Canadian making his mark in the IndyCars on the final lap, working the backstretch, and Scott Goodyear is about to score his first victory in the IndyCars and do it at a 500-mile race. The twin checkered flags lie just ahead, and the McKinsey car with Scott Goodyear at the wheel has taken the win with the first win for Walker Motorsports. In 2nd place, Paul Tracy flashes across the line. Rahal Boycell is 3rd. Al Unser Jr. comes across in 4th place. And Goodyear jumps from 6th to 4th place in the PPG standings. Look at that group. Boy, They are excited. Gary Gerold's right there.
Derek, come here and enjoy this moment. What does this mean to this team?
Well, hopefully it's another year in the 93 season. You know, a bit more sponsorship comes along. McKenzie stays with us, and we go on. Hopefully it's what we need, you know.
It makes up a little bit for the bitter disappointment of that great finish in Indianapolis, I would think.
Well, I think so. I think some respects, Michigan's a harder race to win. So I think Scott did a great job.
And a cooling bath to go along with it. We offer our congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, Paul.
Scott Goodyear did a superlative job as Walker Motorsports takes the victory and Scott Goodyear his first win. International Race of Champions coming up in just a few minutes.
Just another day at the office.
And rolling for the first time into the winner's circle, 32-year-old Canadian from Ontario, Canada, Scott Goodyear. What a satisfying moment this must be, not only for him, but here comes the team. And boy, are they happy. What a wonderful moment. The first IndyCar victory, the first 500-mile race victory for a young driver.
The green stretch of grass here at Michigan International Speedway. We saw a good race.
Okay, we do all those hats later, okay?
Down the pits at the Penske pit, Paul Tracy. As he's climbed out of his car, his chance gone. He finished in second place, but still, he looks so very good. And we see where the new names of this sport are to come from. Now let's go to Jackaroo. Out, Paul Tracy and Scott Goodyear put on one whale of a battle. There's Leslie. Boy, look how happy he is. The final results, unofficial, of course, for the moment. Scott Goodyear wins it. Paul Tracy finishes in second. Raul Boisel third. Allenser Jr. fourth. And Scott Pruitt with a nice finish in fifth place. Here's the rest of the results. And let's go down to Gary Gerold.
Well, Paul Tracy is signing a cap as we await that victor's interview. Paul, what is the feeling like, because you're so close to winning for the first time in this 500-mile race, but then there's a satisfaction that goes with a second-place finish?
You know, I think I'm really happy to get the Mobil 1 Maxwell House Marlboro car just to the finish, just to get through my first 500-mile. And you know, I kind of played the hare for a while, which I shouldn't have. We could have cooled down and saved the car for the end, but you know, all in all, I'm happy with the way the car ran and the way the crew performed in the pits.
Well, we congratulate you. I know there's disappointment because you're not over there in victory lane, but a fine job.
Yeah, you know, the crew gave me a great car, and I just want to thank Roger Penske for giving me the opportunity to come back here.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Let's go to victory lane and Jackaroo.
Well, first of all, second place at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. You were literally in tears after that. Hey, your first 500-mile race. Scott Goodyear, congratulations. A heck of a run.
I'll tell you, it's odd that we win our first IndyCar event on an oval because we only started ovals 3 years ago, but I'll tell you, it feels great. When we had that last yellow flag, we had to run to our fuel numbers, and we couldn't really catch up. We just sort of sitting there and watching, and then we got that yellow. I knew our fuel was all right, and when Derek said go ahead and run higher RPMs and 100% fuel, I knew we were going racing. And when the green came out just before there in those pace laps, when they're cleaning up Brayton's car, all I could think about was sitting second at Indy, and I thought, this is not happening again.
How about when you made the pass? I mean, take us through what that was.
Well, the only thing is I knew the car could really go up in the top or down below, and tires were probably a little bit cold because we came off the yellow, but thought I'm going to go around the outside and stick it there. And I think we didn't, you know, I think the other style of Chevrolet motors have a little bit more down the straight, which they showed because Paul was able to come up underneath me and get going down into 3, and thought there's no way. It's just the last few laps or last 8 laps, wherever it was flat out, and that's the way we ran at Indy, and that's the way we were going to run here.
Big change from Indianapolis, though, Paul. This time he's in victory lane.
And Scott Goodyear's first IndyCar win comes in his 52nd start. The points battle, well, it tightens a little bit with Bobby Rahal falling out early. We'll be back with more from Michigan.
Morning breath.
Once you're mad.
The Race of Champions continues next on ABC Sports.
More celebration here and more racing on ABC Sports. Next, the International Race of Champions, round number 3 at a racetrack where all 12 have competed. Don't go away. We take a look at the final results. Chevy engines ran 1st through 6th in this field. 7th place, Buddy Lazier, that's a Buick engine. We look down through the rest of the field now. Of all 24, Bobby Rahal with an 11th place finish. Rick Mears, a disappointing 16th. Eddie Cheever, so many hopes today, finishes in 20th. There's the rest of the field. Let's go to Gary Gerald, who is now with Al Unser Jr.
Al sits here on the wall. Al, I know that when you got out of the car, you went directly to Paul Tracy and had some pointed words. Why were you unhappy?
Well, I just wanted to tell Paul that he can't move over on anybody down the straightaways at any of the ovals or anything like that. And he moved over on Scott, tried to block him, and then tried to block Bosell, and then tried to block me. And I just wanted to tell him that just try to teach him and make him learn that you can't do that running 200 on these ovals, because you'll end up hurting somebody very badly. So.
Is it a closed issue now?
It is a closed issue, yeah. I talked with Roger, and you know, I think Paul understands now.
Okay.
So.
Thank you, Junior. On a fourth-place finish, we congratulate you, the Indy champion. Let's get back to Jack.
Well, Gary, I'm with the third-place finisher, Rahal Bosell. You can continue to get better and better, but a little bit of a disappointment this time because you had to make an extra pit stop.
Yeah, I did an extra pit stop with, I think, which really didn't need. I think it was a misunderstanding between our dashboard and the computer on the pits, and so probably that cost a better place for us.
It's probably why he didn't want to get out of the way either, because he felt he could get back in the hunt. Paul?
Rahal Bosell finishes in third, 7 pit stops when everyone else took 6. So the race has been run, and a great race it was, with a new champion and a new 500 champion, Scott Goodyear. Don't forget, IROC is coming up. The Canadian flag flies over the winner's circle here, and a Canadian driver, Scott Goodyear, celebrates his victory at the Michigan 500 down below. Here's the remainder of the IndyCar schedule. Next week, of course, to Cleveland, Ohio, on the road course at the Burke Lakefront Airport, and then up to Road America, then to Vancouver, and then to Lexington, Ohio, and to Nazareth, Pennsylvania. The 3rd of October, the challenge will be held there. We have 2 new names, Mario Andretti and Scott Goodyear, added to the list of drivers. And then the race finale in Monterey, California at the beautiful Laguna Seca Raceway.
Well, as this season passes its 2/3 point, it begins to look to next year. The outlook is very bright. The accord between CART and Tony George of Indianapolis Motor Speedway bodes well, I think, for rule stability, and I hope for the eventual substantial reduction in racing costs. Teams from other series, especially IMSA, are looking at IndyCar racing too. Very good prospects. Young drivers, good future.
And great racing here today. Ending up with this man, 32-year-old Canadian Scott Goodyear, in the winner's circle. He was so close at Indy, but he takes the win here. A great race, another great Michigan 500 on a beautiful day in Michigan. Coming up next, the International Race of Champions. Round number 3, the last 2 rounds will be contested right here at Michigan International.